the CARO KANN defense. I'm not only going to be showing you all the moves, I'm going to be taking you from 500 all the way to 2000, showing you the opening, the middle game plans, the tactics, the end game strategies, everything that you need to know about the CARO KANN defense. I've already trained everything on chessreps.com. So if you watch this video to the end, your ratings will not just go up, it will explode. Opponent is now 500, kicking things off with the CARO KANN defense. Let's play pawn to c6. You're about to learn everything about the CARO KANN, from ideas for the beginners all the way up to expert level. Knight c3 was played, and in the CARO KANN, we're always going to follow up c6 with d5. The most, well, taking on d5 is what you're going to be seeing mostly, basically, and this is called the exchange CARO KANN. Playing the CARO KANN defense, the exchange CARO KANN is one of the lines that you kind of want to ensure that you know what the plans are. Pawn to f4, I have no clue why my opponent played this. It looks like a little Grand Prix setup, but this is just, I don't see what it does. Maybe White is trying to get like nice central pawns, but now we're able to take on e4. And being a CARO KANN player, once you play d5, you're going to be taking on e4. And then once this knight takes back, you play the move knight to f6. So this pawn to f4 move was just completely wasting time because we get exactly what we wanted. And there's no pawn to d4. So white should have actually replaced this f4 move with d4. All this f4 move does is weaken these diagonals pointing towards the king. This diagonal is also pointing towards the king. So white may also have issues getting that king out the center of the board. Knight takes f6 was played. I want you guys to understand something about development in chess. One, two, three knight moves was just played. I played one knight move, and once I take back on f6, it allows my bishop to be developed. With that being said, I could say I have a lead in development. The knight moved three times, my knight moved once. White is just done by two moves. Finally, d4 was played. We can't necessarily punish white for playing this f4 move right now, by the way. So let's just do what we know we're supposed to do. And in these types of structures, which you're going to be seeing a lot more going down in this video, it's going to be bishop to d6. The bishop goes to d6, you castle your king, and then to get these minor pieces in the game, we usually develop the knight on b8 before we develop the bishop on c8. Pawn c3 was played. This is also another thematic move in this line. I think white is doing everything correct except this f4 move. So think of what white is doing is correct, but the pawn just does not belong on f4. So white is just behind by a move. So let's just get the king out the center of the board. Usually white players here try to play moves like bishop to d3, queen c2, point them towards our h7 pawn, but that's where this knight comes in. Knight to f3 was played. Being a CARO KANN player playing this line, if you're ever able to play the move rook to e8, checking the opponent's king, who is in the center of the board, always do it. It's not necessarily a tempo though, because white is trying to develop the bishop anyway. So I'm assuming the move bishop to e2 will be played here. So bishop e2 was played, and what you guys should already understand from watching a lot of my videos is if your king is out the center of the board and your opponent's king is in the center of the board, you should try everything in your power to keep the opponent's king in the center of the board. Even if you can't keep their king in the center of the board forever, the longer you keep their king in the center, the better it is. So the move that I'm going to play here is queen to e7, PP on the PP, because the bishop is pinned. We're applying pressure to the pinned bishop. He could legally castle. He could castle legally. But if he castles the king, there will be a drawback. The bishop on e2 will only be guarded once. So we're keeping his king in the center for at least one, two more moves, and then we're going to be continuing with our development. The knight went back to g1. This is how not to play chess, guys. Don't develop a piece and then undevelop that piece. Like, I wasn't necessarily threatening to take the bishop, by the way, especially since the knight goes back to g1. Now the king is just never going to leave the center because he's undeveloping his pieces. In fact, he's now helping me to play moves like bishop to g4, PP on the PP. Anytime you have the opponent's piece that is pinned, you want to ensure that you apply pressure to the pin piece, because pin pieces does not protect. It may seem as if the bishop is able to take my bishop, but the bishop does not protect the g4 square because of the spin. Queen to d3 was played. Doesn't do much. The queen kept on defending the bishop. We have one, two, three attackers on the bishop. White has one, two, three defenders on the bishop. So white is not losing any material here. The plan here is to develop my knight. If you think knight d7 is a fine move, then you are correct. But the guy's king is in the center of the board. If the king is in the center of the board, you should try to open the center of the board. And we open the center of the board with the use of pawn breaks. So pawn to c5, I'm trying to open the center. Like he's not going to take, he needs to develop his dark squared bishop, try to at least castle on the queen side. But even if he doesn't take, I may take. And then once the pawn takes, this diagonal is now pointing towards the king. So bishop to d2, he did develop. Let's just take on d4 here, just opening the position. That way, even if he tries to castle on the queen side, we're going to be having so much open lines pointing towards his king. The king is also still not able to get castle because of the drawback. If he castles, I'm going to have three attackers versus two defenders. So now we just need to continue with our development. No way to win immediately. Let's just develop our last piece. Every single piece that I have is now doing something except my a8 rook. So once I swing my rook to c8 or d8, putting the rook on the open file, my opponent is very, very kind, decided to castle the king. This is one of the main mistakes that persons play that causes them to blunder. I'm actually thinking of making a video called Different Ways How People Blunder. And the drawback principle is one of them, where the king guards the bishop. He castles, the king no longer guards the bishop, which means now we take the bishop for free and we're winning. Once the knight takes, the queen takes back. Once the queen takes, or rook takes back, and then it's just completely winning. Already at move 14, we're ahead by a piece. So knight takes was played. Let's simply take the knight. Trading is what you want if you're ahead in material, by the way. White should try their best not to trade. The issue with White's position is if they try not to trade and move the queen away, then their king is going to be attacked. So White did trade. Now we're just ahead by a piece. The pawn on d4 is unprotected. The pawn on b2 is unprotected. And my rook is also on the opponent's second rank. And that's where you want to have your rooks. Pawn to g3 was played. Opponent is trying to protect this pawn, but this pawn is left hanging. So do we take this free pawn? I have to be a bit careful, because the rook is on the same line as my unprotected bishop. And once I take with the knight, I'm worried about some discovered attacks. This bishop, and I'm not trying to lose any material. But if the bishop, there's no good scores for the bishop, so let's just take the pawn. The whole idea is also to get my a rook in the game, rook c8, and then I'm going to be playing chess with every single piece that I have. Bishop to e3, not a move I was expecting, to be honest, because that's just an unprotected square. But if I take the bishop, they're gonna take my knight. So it's not like I'm about to win an entire piece. But before we do all of this, let's just get to a rook in the game with check. We're gaining a tempo anyway, so everything is fine. The king has to go to b1. And then once the king goes to b1, now we could start thinking. I take the bishop, the rook takes my knight, I move my bishop, I'm ahead by a piece. Or I play knight to f5, protecting my bishop. Their bishop is still under attack, but my master plan is to have two rooks on the second rank. If you could have your rooks on the second rank, if you're playing with black, or the seventh rank, if you're playing with white, then it's a winning advantage. So it all depends on where this bishop moves to. So if bishop takes a7, that's the move I wanted to explain. Now I'm able to put two of my rooks on the second rank. And this could very well be a checkmate. It's also very similar to a checkmate that is called the blind swine mate. And this happens when there are two rooks on the second rank. There's also nothing that the opponent could do to protect the b2 pawn. I mean, he could try bishop to d4, guarding the pawn, but my knight covers the d4 square. So all I'm going to do is do a removing the guard tactic, taking the bishop first, then taking on b2. The point back to d4, we were expecting this. This tactic is called removing the guard. The bishop guards the pawn, or knight attacks the bishop, get rid of the bishop. And then once the rook takes, we now take on b2 with check. The opponent's king now has to move. The king moves to a1. We take on a2 with check. And this is why this is so deadly, because we could like check the king and then force the opponent's king up to move. And then we take all these pawns. Now, my bishop is unprotected, so I need to be a bit careful. And my back rank is also a bit weak. So it really doesn't matter where I move my bishop, to be honest. Like once the rook checks, I may have to block the check with my bishop. So with that being said, I'm going to pull the bishop back to, it's either e7 or c7. Once I'm guarding the d8 square, I should be doing fine. Let's put it on e7 so that way I could say my rook is guarding the bishop. You know, like when you're playing, you want to have some level of piece coordination. Rook to c1 looks like a natural move here, but that's actually one of the worst move in the position because it leads to a checkmate. Rook to d1 was played instead. Now we're seeing what white's idea is. White is trying to sacrifice the rook. And then once we take, the other rook comes down and that's going to be a checkmate. But all we need to do is create something called loft where you push the h or the g pawn. Once you push one of these pawns, you're now just safe. Like he checks your king, you just move the king and you're fine. Rook to d7 was played, and believe it or not, my fellow viewers, there is a checkmate in this position. I want you guys to notice how if I check on b2, the king moves. I would love to check on a1, but it's not going to be a checkmate because the king takes my rook. With that being said, I am going to check on b2, but once the king moves, I'm going to play the move bishop to a3, protecting my rook. And then there's nothing in which white could do to prevent rook to a1. So let's give a check. We could also start by playing bishop to a3, but it's best to play the more forcing moves in the position. Once the king move, now we play bishop a3. He could give a check. We move the king. After a check, there's nothing else that white could do. The opponent gave the last check. We just need to move the king to g7. I mean, unless they're trying to sacrifice on g8, there's no more checks in the game, and there's nothing to prevent rook a1 check. Rook d2 was tried, but that's just a checkmate. More CARO KANN against 600 rated players. Opponent is now 600. We're still going to be playing the CARO KANN. Let's go pawn to c6. Knight c3 was played. We're always going to be playing d5 as our second move. So once you play c6, just play d5. It really doesn't matter what they play. If they ever take on d5, it's called the exchange variation of the CARO KANN. Once they play d4, this is now the classical variation of the CARO KANN, and it could be reached in another scenario. But once you get a position like this, we're actually always going to be taking on e4, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the opponent to move the knight as many times as possible in the opening because this is going to be wasting time. So after knight takes e4, we play the move knight to f6, attacking his knight. And then if he takes on f6, we get him to move the knight 1, 2, 3 times while we only moved our knight once. And that's what he did. Let's take back. And then from here, how we're going to be developing our pieces, it's like a setup, like exactly how you see me develop my pieces. That's how you should do it. And any queen to e2 check is something that we're not ever going to be worried about because for one, the queen was guarding d4. Now the queen is no longer guarding d4. Him checking our king didn't really gain any tempo on us because we wanted to develop our bishop anyways. So all he's doing is leaving his pawn unprotected, blocking out his bishop while helping us to develop our bishop. And there's no additional ways for him to apply more pressure to our bishop. So he develops his knight to guard the pawn. Let's develop our bishop to d6. This is usually always where we put our bishop. Then we're going to get to our king out the center of the board. And one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, especially when your opponent checks on e2, because that's bad. The queen and the rook is now on the same file. Well, the queen and the king. If you could get your rook on e8, where the queen and the king is on, it could lead to some nasty discovered attack. So already he has to be careful because he already has issues developing, which is why he moves his queen to d2 because he's trying to develop his light squared bishop. But by moving the queen to d2, he's now blocking in the dark squared bishop. So he's going to have to move the queen again. And this is why you don't want to be developing your queen too early in the opening stage of the game. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. I'm just going to castle my king. I think he's trying to develop his bishop and get his king castled, which is the right thing to do. But I think even though he's playing with the white pieces, if he's not careful, I'm going to be having a lead in development, even though I'm playing with black. Okay, the opponent moves the queen to c3. So again, they're trying to develop as much of their pieces as possible. But I want you guys to notice something. Notice how the queen and the king is now sitting on the same diagonal. My initial plan was to play rook e8, putting my rook on the same line as the king. But what if I play a move like queen to e7? I put my queen on the same file as the king, but then I'm supporting my bishop to go to b4 and just immediately win the opponent's queen. So now he has two threats to prevent. What are we learning from this game? Avoid moving your queen in the opening stage of the game. Because not only did my opponent just blunder this queen, he develops his bishop to c4 and he also blundered his bishop. Like, I could actually just take on c4 and say check. And then once I take on c4 and say check, it's a discovered attack, so he has to block. The thing is, he's gonna block with the queen, and I'm not gonna win the queen, so we're gonna choose to win the queen. Now, how I'm gonna be winning the queen is playing bishop to b4. This is called a pin, by the way. The queen and the king is on the same diagonal, so we hit him with bishop to b4. The queen is now not able to move because it exposes the more valuable piece, which is the king. So he has to castle or sack the queen or do something. But from here, it's just game. So he decided to sack the queen. But after sacking the queen and I take the queen with check, this is also a fork because I'm checking the king and I'm attacking his bishop at the same time. So it doesn't matter if he blocks with the bishop or anything. My queen takes the bishop. It also prevents his king from castling on the king side. And if he castles on the queen side, which he did, the rook no longer guards this pawn. So my queen is able to take this pawn for free, and I'm threatening checkmate. So this is just completely losing. This is why you don't develop your queen too early. The guy didn't even allow me to complete my development. He decided to play bishop to b4, which makes some sense. He's basically saying, I'm attacking your rook. If you check my king is going to escape. So let's just play rook to d8 in this position. So that way, I put my rook on this d file. So that way, if I could get a chance to get rid of this pawn, then this is going to be a checkmate. So here's what I'm going to do with this plan. I'm going to start by playing the move knight to a6, attacking the bishop, but I'm also supporting the c5 push because once I push c5, it's going to be bad for him to take. Bishop e7 attacks my rook. It didn't really do anything. Let's just move the rook. No, his bishop is still under attack. He's still forced to move the bishop. He has to pull the bishop back to a3. And that's when I'm going to play pawn c5, where he's not able to take. So let's play pawn c5 here. I'm just trying to guard the d2 square with something. So he moves the rook to g1, doesn't really do much. I'm trying to see how I could set up a checkmate in this position. Not really seeing it though, but let's take the pawn on d4. At least it opens the file for my c rook. He took with the knight. Now let's play rook to c1. My rook is on the same line as his king. And remember, he's not able to move this knight because if he moves the knight, for example, if he takes my bishop, that's going to be a checkmate. All I'm trying to do is protect the d2 square. He puts his rook on d1. How do we continue here? Okay, now I'm going to play, let's go queen c4 here. I'm not necessarily threatening a checkmate on c2 just yet. Okay, he moves the pawn to guard the mate, but he blundered his knight because the c pawn is pinned. Remember, pinned pieces does not protect. My rook is able to take the knight. The pawn is not able to take due to the pin. If he takes with the rook, I take the rook. The pawn is still not able to take due to the pin. So this is basically just GG's. He moves his rook. Let's just move the queen out the way. I'm also thinking of some possible ways to checkmate his king on the light squares. For example, I'm trying to play, well, he attacks my queen again. Let's just move the queen. I'm trying to get my bishop to f5 so that way I'm able to checkmate him on c2. He attacks my queen again, but then he gave me the rook again. And that's just a free rook because of this pin. And my opponent resigns. More CARO KANN, the 700 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. More CARO KANN theory coming your way. Knight f3, we're going to be playing d5. I want you guys to know everything about the CARO KANN. He took, we take back, and this is the exchanged version of the CARO KANN. What we see about the exchange version of the CARO KANN, just develop the two knights first, develop one knight, develop the other knight. Let's develop the other knight since he plays c3. What we're not gonna do is play e6 and block our bishop in. Like some persons even know this, but they still play e6 and just forgot about their light squared bishop because they want to quickly castle the king. After bishop to d3, we get the light squared bishop out first. If you can't put it on f5 because of this bishop, just put it on g4 and pin the knight. And then now that the knight is pinned, we're going to finish our development. Bishop f4, now we play e6. The whole idea is to develop our last piece, which is our dark squared bishop, get working out the center of the board, and then we're going to be starting our plan, which is usually a queenside attack. So knight d2 was played. Now, one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is whenever you see the bishop on f4, it's usually good to just play an immediate bishop to d6. If the bishop is already on g5, you could play bishop e7. I've played a game where someone moves the bishop from f4 to g5. Didn't really do much. Let's just take here. And then once we castle our king, we're going to have the most solid position. So he castle. Let's just castle. And the plan from here is to attack on the queen side. Pawn to h3 was played. I really don't mind if you guys just play bishop takes knight and then continue with your attack. But I like to keep tension in the position, and I like to be annoying. I like this pin to be annoying. I want them to play moves like g4. I want them to push pawns in front of the king so that way it weakens the king. So I'm just going to maintain what's happening here, and then I'm going to continue with my minority attack. That's what we're going to be playing in the exchange version of the CARO KANN, by the way. Like these two pawns, we're trying to push these two pawns up the board. Queen to b3 was played. I'm already thinking of playing rook to b8 here because the plan is to play b5 anyways. So rook to b8 is not necessarily, oh, I'm being too passive. That's not a good way to guard a pawn. I'm actually just trying to do my plan, which is to play b5 followed by b4, open up the line for my rook and attack on the queen side. So he plays rook to e1. Now we play b5. And for the players who don't know how to count, I'm covering the b5 square once. He's covering the b5 square twice. I'm still going to play pawn to b5. Because if he dares to take on b5 with his bishop, he's actually going to be walking right into a pin. And then I'm just going to play pawn a6, apply pressure to his pin bishop, and then I'm just completely winning the game. With that being said, if he wants to prevent me from playing b4, he could play a3, but that's when I'm going to play a5 with the whole idea of playing b4. This is the plan. Like once you guys know and understand this, then you should be fine. Okay, so he pulls the queen back to c2. It shouldn't change much. We're still going to be playing b4. Another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is putting this rook on c8, just putting the rook on the same line as the queen, is also very, very thematic when you play the exchange CARO KANN. Because once the rook goes here, you're now thinking about some knight b4 ideas, and the c pawn is going to be pinned. Knight to e5 is definitely an interesting move. If I take the knight, he's going to take, and that's going to be a fork. So we're not going to be taking that knight. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking on c3. If he plays knight takes, my queen is guarding, so I'm fine. This is the whole point of the queen side minority attack, by the way. Like, why do we play rook to b8, pawn to b5, pawn to b4, taking on c3? Is so that way they have a weak pawn on c3. So if he takes with the pawn on c3 becomes a backward pawn, and that's the pawn that we're going to be targeting. If he decides to take with the queen, however, then the d4 pawn becomes an isolated pawn. He took on c6 first, which is a blunder because I'm not going to take the knight just yet. What if I just take this knight? Here's the thing. This is just losing. If I take this knight, I'm attacking his rook. So even if he tries to move this knight away, his rook is under attack. And if I take and he checks and I take, I'm ahead by a piece. If I take and he moves the rook, I could either play rook to c8, apply pressure to the pin knight and win the knight, or I could just queen the pawn because my bishop covers the d1 square. So let's just take the knight. This is called an in-between move, by the way. It's like the whole point is to take the knight, but we take the other knight first. So he took with the queen. Now we take on c6. And just like that, we are ahead by an entire piece. Now that we're ahead by an entire piece, the goal is usually to start trading pieces off the board. I'm not really seeing any kingside attack. He plays rook to c1 to attack my queen. Now I'm going to play the move queen to b6 because, yes, I had to move my queen, but I'm moving my queen to squares where I still apply pressure to his weaknesses. I'm applying some pressure to his weak d4 pawn, which I'm not going to take because bishop h7 would win my queen, but I'm also applying pressure to his weak b2 pawn as well. So it's best for him to just guard the b2 pawn, and then I'm just going to swing this rook in the game, maybe pull this bishop back, trade some pieces off the board, and just win the endgame. He decides to guard this pawn instead, which is weird because he didn't need to guard the pawn. I'm still not going to take here though, because it's very risky. If I take, he goes rook here, and then I may have to take, he goes back. And if I put my queen here, bishop here still wins my queen. So let's just be the principal player that I am and get all my pieces in the game. Every single piece is now playing a role in this attack. Now he plays b3 to guard the pawn. We're just trying to trade. Let's play bishop back to g6 in this position. If you're ahead in material, trade pieces off the board. That's how you're going to be winning, especially if you're a CARO KANN player. If you're a CARO KANN player, you're more on the solid side. You don't play CARO KANN if Mikhail Tal is your favorite player. So he's not trading the pieces off the board. You could say that's the correct thing to do. No, I'm just going to play knight e4, just putting my knight on his half of the board. If he plays pawn to f3, hit the knight, I'm able to play knight g3, hit the bishop. I want to play moves like queen to b4, knight c3, hit the bishop. I'm just trying to get some pieces off the board. So he puts the bishop on d3. Looks like he's trying to trade. We have no issues trading. Let's go queen b4. Let's keep putting more pieces on his half of the board. If the bishop takes, we just take back with the bishop. The plan could be to play knight c3 or even queen to a3. Queen to a3 is also a plan, just to keep putting more pieces on his half. And I'm trying to infiltrate into his position. For example, I could also play queen to d2 just to get the queens off the board. Okay, he plays rook to d1. He's not trying to trade anything. At least he's principled and he understands how to lose properly. What I'm going to do now is just play rook to c3, more pieces on his half of the board, pinning the bishop to the queen. The plan from here is to play moves like rook to c8, doubling up my rooks on the c file. Now he plays rook to b1. Not sure why rook to b1. Hmm. Keep in mind, he has too many pieces on light squares. I could sack my rook, pull my knight back, and take the bishop. But let's just double up on the c file here. This would be a very nice move to convert, by the way. So queen went back to e1. It's not a bad move. He's basically saying that my rook is pinned to the queen. But that's a free pawn, though. It's definitely a free pawn. That's definitely not a free pawn. Because if I take the pawn, my queen is on the same line as the rook. He's going to play bishop to a3, and that's a discovered attack. That was actually a test. Let's go queen to a6. Let's get out of the pin. Now I'm thinking of sacrificing here, not followed by knight c3, but maybe just moving the knight. I'm just trying to trade as much pieces as possible to convert this. He took, let's just take back, hit the rook. The rook is now forced to move, and now I'm just going to infiltrate. The goal from here is to put two rooks on his second rank, or a rook and a queen on his second rank. Okay, rook to c1 is just a counting issue. I have one, two, three pieces targeting c1. He only has two pieces protecting c1. So all I need to do here is to take the rook. He's about to lose his queen, by the way, because once the other rook takes, I take, and then that's just pinned. If he takes with the queen, then I just take, and yeah, this is game. This is not over. And my opponent resigns. More CARO KANN against 800 level players. More CARO KANN against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. We're still going to be using the CARO KANN defense. Let's go c6. After d4, we play d5. And my opponent is playing the advanced variation of the CARO KANN. And I I have played pawn to c5 in this speed run. Bishop to f5 is also one of the moves, but let's just play pawn to c5. It's actually way easier to play pawn to c5. He plays pawn to c3. We develop our knight, applying some pressure to the d4 pawn. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is the d4 pawn is going to be the main target in the opponent's position once you're playing the advanced CARO KANN. Okay, 92 is interesting. The reason why he plays 92 is because he doesn't want me to take, and then pin his knight. So that's definitely an interesting decision. With that being said, we're still going to be taking on d4 so that we could weaken the d4 pawn and then turn the d4 pawn into a backwards pawn. He has to take back with the pawn though, because if he takes with the knight, he's going to be losing his he pawn. Once he takes with the knight, now we're going to be playing the move bishop to f5. We're not able to play bishop to g4 because his knight is on e2, but the bishop is still fine on f5. We're going to be continuing with our ideas. We're going to be playing moves like pawn e6, knight e7. Usually, when the bishop is on f5, we move the bishop to g4, then play knight f5. So let's see how this game will continue. So he plays knight g3, hits the bishop again. Let's just pull the bishop back to g6. I mean, worst case scenario, we could always take this knight on b, but this bishop has done too much work to take this knight on b1. If he plays h4, then we could say he's done some research on the CARO KANN. So he plays bishop to e3. Let's play e6. The goal is to finish our development. Knight e7 to f5 is still an idea. H4, if he plays h4, by the way, we're going to be playing h6. And after h5, we go bishop h7, and our bishop is fine on h7. So we're not worried about anything. Let's just get the setup that we're used to. Let's just get that setup out of the way first. Bishop to b5 is still not losing. Like anytime someone plays bishop b5, I automatically think of queen a5, but he's able to block with the knight. And then one other thing I'm thinking of is just to take the knight first, and then after he takes, then I check. But then if I take his knight first, he's going to take my knight first with a check. With that being said, let's just go knight to e7. Let's continue with our plan. Knight to 5, bishop e7, castle the king. To castle this king, let's move our knight to the f5 square, hit the bishop, target d4. His knight on g3 usually takes here, and then we're just going to be taking back with the bishop, or bishop goes to e7, we castle the king, and then we could play moves like rook to c8, controlling this open c file. So the knight took, let's just take back. If he develops his knight, we could say his development is complete before us, by the way. But there's no way for him to do any pawn break. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is time is not as important if the position is closed. And what I mean by time is like development, the pace in which you quickly get your pieces out. That's actually not important if the position is closed. Because what is he going to do now to keep my king in the center? There's no pawn breaks that he could play. Maybe he could try queen to a4 and said, hey, I'm applying a lot of pressure to your knight. But then I play queen to d7. And then he's like, okay, let's go rook c1, apply more pressure to the knight. But then I go rook to c1. So he plays knight c3. Let's go bishop e7. We're going to be castling our king on the next move. And another important break that I've found on chess reps when I was studying the CARO KANN is pawn to f6. You usually want to play moves like pawn to f6 to apply a lot of pressure to the opponent's center. And if they take on f6, you take with the bishop, and that will apply more pressure to the d4 pawn. Now, by playing a move like f6, you will weaken your e6 pawn a bit, so ensure that you pay attention to that. Queen to a4, was expecting this. Let's just go queen to d7 because he's targeting my knight twice. Now I'm guarding it twice. Maybe rook c1 is definitely something that I'm expecting. This guy's playing some good chess for 800. I'm not going to lie. The only thing is, he's a bit slow. So if you notice, he's taking a lot of time to think. Rook to c1 was played. He's applying more pressure to my knight. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. I can always put a rook on the open c file, so everything will be nice. On to b3. I'm not sure why he played b3. Maybe he's not sure how to continue the position, to be honest. Now, if I play f6, which is one of the thematic breaks, he could play f4, and after takes, nothing really changes. So let's play rook f to c8. Or should I go rook a c8? Let's go rook a c8. I don't think it matters too much because if he takes, I'm always going to play rook takes. The plan was to play a6, and if he takes, I takes, and I want to keep the a pawn guarded. But now if he takes, my rook takes, but then he's able to move the knight, and if a6, it could happen. Because the C file is the only open file on the board right now, and we're not ready to play F6, we could actually double up the rooks on the C file. That's something that I want you guys to learn from this. So don't just watch this video thinking, oh, I'm only learning about the opening. After the opening, there's the middle game, there's the end game. So ensure that you're using those. So he pulls the knight back to e2. That's not a bad move. There's three pieces targeting my pin knight. I'm guarding it with three pieces, so that's good. Now, if I play a6, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes could be a pawn. So we're actually going to take we're going to be going full solid mode here. Let's go rook to c7. We're going to be doubling up on the c file. Every single piece needs to be played in the game. And this guy right here, Daniel, the only reason why your rating is 837, bro, I'm not gonna lie. Maybe you need to play more 15 plus 10 games because this is good. You're gonna lose this game because you're gonna start making a lot of mistakes once the time starts running out. So I advise you, this is what I usually tell my students. He's attacking my bishop, by the way. So let's just pull it back. If you're getting good positions, but then you're losing on time, just put more time on the clock. You're just not ready to play these 10-minute games as yet. Get used to thinking about your moves first. And then once you get used to thinking about your moves, then you could start lowering the time control. But you, bro, 1510, and your rating is going to be 1000 easily. Because this is good. Like, you notice how usually I'm just beating up on the 800. This guy's playing some chess. So now he plays f4. Maybe he wants f5, but I'm covering the f5 one, two, three times. He's only covering f5 twice. With that being said, let's just go rook to c8. Now, every single piece that I have, you could say is doing something, apart from the fact that this bishop is pinning my knight. So now I'm thinking of playing a6. Just get the bishop out of my half of the board, which is why he pulls the bishop back to e2. And now I'm thinking about just moving this knight out the way. Usually knight takes e5 is a sacrifice, but his queen is guarded, so that doesn't work. I'm thinking of a6, b5, but that may leave a6 unprotected. And if I go here, the knight, he has rook takes. Okay, we're still going to be playing a6 because I want to move the knight and I don't want his bishop to be able to come back to b5 here. This guy's playing very well. It's just a pity that he's just going to lose. He's going to lose. He has no time on the clock. But this is very, very solid. I want you guys to pay attention to the pawn structure. Like that's actually usually why people play the CARO KANN, because in order for white to win, white has to play a lot of pawn moves. White has to create some weaknesses, like the d4 pawn is actually a weak backward pawn. But all my pawns are just very, very solid, and I can just do all the play on the open c file. Not sure why he plays rook to a1. I guess it's because his time is running out. You don't just move your rook off an open file. Now I'm able to go knight to b4, threatening a fork on c2. There's no rook takes. The queen has to trade. Now I take back. I'm going to go back to c7, doubling up my rook on the c file. So now he plays f5. And now I see how I'm going to win the game. First of all, knight c2 is a fork. It hits the rook, it hits the bishop, but my bishop is under attack. So first I'm going to take the pawn on f5, knowing if his knight takes, which he quickly did, because the guy has no time on the clock, I take the knight, and then once the rook takes, I fork him, and he's losing. So let's just take the knight. Rook had to take, hit him with knight c2, and okay, he has rook to c1 actually. Rook to c1. I'm not able to take because I'm going to lose my rook, but I have bishop to a3. Nice. Because now once I play bishop to a3, he has to move the rook. The rook is not able to guard the bishop. If he sacked the rook, I'm just going to take back. So this is now just winning. Okay, so he sacked the rook. Let's take this bishop is unprotected and under attack. This pawn is unprotected and under attack, so he has to move. We're going to grab the pawn. Guy only has 20 seconds though. Bishop to g4. He puts his bishop on the same line as my rook, but there's no immediate way for him to do anything about that. So we're actually still going to be taking the free pawn because regardless of where he puts his rook, there's no real threats. So now he moves the rook. No, I'm going to move my rook. Actually, I don't want him to be able to easily play e6. So let's go rook to e7. So that way, if he plays e6, which he still did, I'm going to take. But now his bishop is not able to take because my rook guards it. He plays bishop to g5. He only has a few seconds on the clock. Let's pull back the rook. This is just completely winning though. But then he plays rook to e3. But now the rook and the bishop is on the same diagonal. So now I'm going to hit him with bishop to e3. He is able to play okay, but then he had a check there. But checking is bad actually because there's this skewer happening. So once I move my king, he has to move the rook. And if he moves the rook to e5 to guard his bishop, I take the bishop. And if he takes back my bishop, I take this bishop and I'm winning. So let's just play king to h8 in this position. Once he moves the rook, we take on g5. Okay, but now he takes, I'm just going to take the bishop because then if he goes to d8, if he goes to d8, my bishop guards d8. So let's just take the bishop. He's not it. He thought it was a checkmate, but then he also resigned. More CARO KANN against 900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Plays e4. Let's go CARO. Before we play d5, what will we see? Knight c3, we know this. After knight c3, we need to take on e4. And then once the knight takes, we simply need to play knight to f6. Now, taking on f6, this is usually what they do. We need to take with the e pawn, very important. So that way our bishop is able to get good development. Now, there's a lot of ways in which white could develop here. The main move is actually pawn to c3, bishop d3, queen c2. Let's see what he does though. He decides to play knight to f3. Let's go bishop to d6. The plan is to castle the king here and get the rook on the open e file. Okay, I've seen persons checking the king. Checking the king here is not good because you move the queen too early. It blocks out the bishop. I'm just able to block the check with my bishop. There's no way to apply pressure to my pinned bishop. I know I'm just going to castle and put my rook on the same line as the queen. Now he plays c4. He wants to play d5. I mean, very aggressive, but this is what we call a premature attack because I'm able to defend against his threats by doing what I already wanted to do. I'm just following principles. And he still decides to play d5, which means he also has a counting issue because I'm hitting the pawn twice. He's only guarding it once. So I'm just going to take the pawn. And I get, like, this guy is actually helping me because not only is he giving me a free pawn, once I take the bishop, my next move is to put the rook on the e file. Now, bear with me. My king is out the center. Say it with me. My king is out the center. His king is in the center. What should we do? We should open the center, but the center is already open. So we're just going to try to keep his king in the center of the board. Now, he plays queen to b5. I think he thinks that he's attacking my bishop. This is actually one of those persons who just go for premature attacks. This is not how you want to be playing chess. Like, I know I could trick him. Actually, I'm going to trick him. Watch this. Let's play the principal move first. Let's go rook to e8, checking the king, ensuring that I keep his king in the center of the board. He needs to block the check with one of his bishops. He blocks the check with the bishop. Now, here comes the trick. My bishop is hanging, right? There's nothing guarding my bishop, right? Watch this. Develop the knight. Principles. I'm just following principles. No, he's actually not able to take my bishop. Maybe he will, because he's been trying to take something. But if he dares to touch my bishop, the queen is going to be unprotected. And bishop to b4 will win the queen. That would be a discovered attack. I mean, he's still this. Like, I think he was thinking and he was like, wait, isn't that a bishop? But I thought he saw it. He didn't see it. That's just a queen. This is called a discovered attack. He now has to react to the check. He's not even able to block with the bishop because it's pinned. So now he has to block with the knight or move the king. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what he plays. I'm going to take the queen. Unless he blocks with the queen, my bishop will take the queen. He blocks with the knight. Let's grab the queen. Believe it or not, I'm actually threatening checkmate in one move. It all depends on what he plays. But I want you guys to keep in mind that this rook is pinned. Well, the rook is pinning the bishop. So I was actually threatening to take the knight, but he saw it. He defended against it. Now I want to play knight d4. If he moves the bishop, I take on g2 though. So let's just play rook to d8. Let's get all our pieces in the game. I'm a very principled man. We're always going to be ensuring that we get all our pieces in the game. And we're going to be applying pressure to the pinned knight. The knight is pinned. He's guarding it one, two, three times. We're attacking it one, two, three times. But this bishop is not guarding the knight. But because this bishop is also pinned to the king. So what will he do? He develops the bishop, thinking, okay, let's attack his queen. But the knight is pinned. So my queen could actually take this for free. But I don't want to just take one free bishop. I want to take two free pieces. So first I'm going to take on d2 with check. The rook is not able to take. Well, the rook can take, which he did take. So now we're not going to take the bishop anymore. Now we're going to be taking the rook because I have two pieces guarding the square. This bishop is pinned and is not able to take. And once he moves his king to f1, my fellow peeps, that's just a checkmate. But more CARO KANN at the 1000 level. So stick around. Our opponent is now 1000. He plays e4, which means more CARO KANN theory coming your way. Now, d4, we play d. Any move they play here, we play d5. There's some lines that we didn't cover. Knight c3. Let's just play d5. Maybe he's trying to play the two knights way, but usually they just take on d5 and it transposes. But now he plays d4. So it actually transposes into the regular classical line where we take on e4, and then once the knight takes, we play knight to f6. Maybe we're even going to be seeing an alien gambit. That would be very, very funny. The knight needs to just take on f6 here, which he did. Let's take with the pawn, bishop d6, castling the king. These are the ideas that is coming up. Queen to e2 check is not accurate at all because the plan is to get one of my bishop on e6. Well, this bishop is going to e6. There's no way to apply pressure to my bishop. And then I'm just going to continue with the regular bishop d6, castle the king. But moving the queen to e2 left his d4 pawn unprotected. And you know me, if he does not play a move to protect that pawn, then I will be taking that pawn. So he plays queen to e3. He guards the pawn. He wants to play moves like bishop to c4, apply some pressure to my pinned bishop. So bishop here, I think he will play bishop to c4. So I'm going to be putting my bishop on e7 for the time being and then get my king out the center of the board. Now, what I want you guys to notice is queen and his king is actually on the same line. So if I'm able to castle my king, get the rook on the same line as his king and his queen, he's going to be in trouble. He plays queen e2, queen e3. First of all, you shouldn't be moving your queen too early in the opening stage of the game. Second of all, you shouldn't be moving the same piece more than once in the opening. Not only did he move his queen, but he moves the queen more than once, and he's blocking out this bishop. He finally made a principled move. Let's get our king out the center of the board, and now the goal is to get our rook on the same line as his queen and his king as quickly as possible. I think he's in time to get castled though. Not gonna lie, like he just needs to develop his light squared bishop, like bishop to d3, and he should be good. Yep, bishop to d3, good move. Let's just keep developing then. Let's go knight to d7. Let's just get as much of our pieces in the game. Like, there's no immediate way to punish him here because he's just clearly going to be castling on the next move. So he castled the king. Let's go rook to e8. Same idea. Rook is on the same line as the queen. The knight could go to f8. Okay, queen to e4 applies pressure to h7, but that's actually the purpose of this knight f8 move. Like it protects h7. We never have to be worrying about any form of checkmates on h7. His queen is also compromised on e4 because we're going to be able to attack that queen with a discovered attack very, very easily. Bishop to d2, he's developing, not bad. I notice my rook is on the same line as his queen, so I'm trying to get creative. Let's move this bishop out the way. That's where the bishop belongs anyways. Now my rook is really on the same line as his queen, but I don't really have any good discovered attacks unless I'm trying to win a pawn, which is enough to win the game. So he needs to move his queen off the same line as my rook. Unless he plays something like rook to e1, rook to e1 would be a valid move. So bishop to f4 was played. What is this? Queen is on the same line as my rook though. There has to be something here. Okay, let's think. Bishop to d5 hits the queen, queen to f5. The queen is the only defender of this bishop as well. That's something that I'm seeing. So, okay. It's just bishop g4. Bishop g4, where does he put? Wait, is the queen trapped or something? Bishop g4, the queen is trapped. He has to take my rook, and then I take his queen. Then he takes my bishop, and the math is gonna be: I got 9 points, he got 8 points. But then afterwards, I'm gonna take this knight, double up his pawns. This is crazy. Bishop g4 traps the queen. The queen is now just trapped. There's no way for him to go. He has to sacrifice his queen. Like if he tries to do anything weird, like knight e5 or bishop e5, it's just bad. Bishop e5 looks like it could be a try. Because then if I take the bishop, he takes my bishop this way. But if bishop to e5, I'm going to take his knight on f3 first. And then when he takes back on f3, I take on e5. Whoa. Whoa. So he plays knight to e5. He's putting his knight in the way, sacrificing his knight. That's just a knight though. Let's just take the knight. Let's take the knight. My bishop is unprotected, but that's fine. If he takes this way, then my bishop is going to be under attack, but then the pawn is pinned to the queen. So I'm not necessarily forced to move the bishop. Oh, but then he decides to take with his bishop instead. Because maybe if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop. But let's just take the bishop, because if he takes my bishop, then I take a pawn. If he takes my bishop here, then it gives me time to defend this bishop, basically, which is what he did. So let's just, okay, how do I do this? Let's just pull the bishop back to e6. Nothing fancy here. We're just ahead by an entire piece. Queen b6, rook d8, get all our pieces in the game. This battery is going nowhere. Like, I'm not going to accidentally move away my knight from guarding my h7 pawn. He puts his rook on the same line as my queen. You see what I do when persons have their rook on the same line as my queen? I move my queen out the way. I don't keep my queen on the same line as someone's rook and then wait on tactics to come. No, all I'm going to do from here is swing this rook in the game. Every piece is going to be playing a role, and I'm going to be ahead by a piece. D3 was played. He guards the pawn. Let's go rook to d8. Now, every single piece is in the game. I'm not thinking of moves like bishop d5 hits the queen because the queen is the only defender of this pawn on e5. So I'm trying to apply more pressure to it. So h3 was played. Doesn't do much. Before I apply more pressure to this pawn, let's play knight to g3. Now, if the moment I play bishop to d5, if he moves the queen, then I'll be able to take the pawn on e5. That's my plan. And there's no f4 to guard the pawn because my queen on f6 pins the f pawn to the king. So a4 was played. Still not sure why he did that. Bishop to d5 hits the queen, winning the pawn on d5. Now, where he puts the queen is also important because I may have some nice tactical ideas, especially on his g2 pawn. Remember, we spoke about this. When it comes to attacking someone's king, we try to attack the pawns around the king. He pulls the queen back to e3, but because we're ahead by an entire piece, we're just going to trade the queens off the board. And then once the pawn takes, we take the free pawn, and we're now ahead by an entire 3 points. Okay, e4. E4 is more material. I think he's just being kind at this point. Let's take the bishop. And then once he takes, we simply take the rook. And then once he takes, we simply take the bishop. Maybe he thinks I'm going to be getting checkmated on the back rank if he checks, but my knight is able to block. So let's take the rook, trading more pieces because we're winning. And then once the rook takes, we take the bishop. The check does not work because my knight is able to block. In fact, it would have actually been better for him to just play rook to d7 and get his rook on my 7th rank because now I'm just not going to give him any of my pawns. So he puts his rook here. Let's go here. We're not giving him any of the pawns. And this is going to be one of those slow grind end games. It's completely winning though. He attacks the pawn. Let's play a6. It's very important that we do not rush the end game. So the first thing that I'm going to do is solve the little problems that I have. For example, my knight on f8 is pinned. So after he moves his rook, I'm going to play a move like pawn to g6. I'm going to move my king to g7. I'm going to get my knight in the game. Pawn c4 doesn't do much. Let's get the king in the game. Knight to e6 could be my plan. Maybe even pawn c5, knight d4, so that way my knight is fully centralized. With 5, still don't know what that does. Let's develop the knight, hit the rook. Rook now has to move. And keep in mind, once we're in the end game, the goal is to attack the opponent's pawns. So I'm thinking of moves like knight to c5, hit the pawn, knight e4, hit the rook. Yeah, let's go. No, let's actually go pawn c5. That's what we spoke about. Now he's not able to push the pawn. He's trying to pin my knight to my rook. Let's just move the rook out the way so that way I'm able to move my knight. I also need to ensure that I get my king in the game. Yeah, he got his king in the game, but this is just winning. Let's get my king in the game as well. He has no possible checks on my king. He's trying to check here. Let's give a check. If he goes back, then I'm cutting off his king. He goes back. Now his king is actually cut off from the game. My rook is on his 2nd rank. Now I play knight d4. There's also no rook to f3. And my target is now this pawn. So I'm thinking of moves like rook to b2, followed by rook takes b3. And that should just be winning. b4 doesn't do much. Let's go rook to g2. Attacking weak pawns. That's what we do in the endgame. Okay, he moves his king to e1. Now the game is really over. Knight c2 checks the king, hit the rook. Once the king moves, we'll take the knight, and that's GG's. He moves the king to grab the rook. Okay, king e3. Well, he resigns. More CARO KANN at the 1100 level. Stick around. Opponent is now in the 1100 region. Plays e4. You know that we're going to be playing CARO KANN defense this video. Now, after d4, we're just going to be playing d5. The exchange CARO KANN is one of the main things that I usually see. So ensure that you use chess reps to learn all the move repetitions to play the exchange CARO KANN. The advanced CARO KANN is also one of these ones, but we know about the advanced CARO KANN. Once they play the advanced CARO KANN, we're going to play the move pawn to c5, and then the whole theme of the game is going to be apply pressure to the d4 pawn. And for the players who do not know what to do against this, you should actually just take the pawn on c5. I'm not trying to be greedy, but so that way you don't have a weak pawn. But after knight f3, let's just continue with knight to c6. If they take, we're not necessarily down a pawn. It's just temporarily. It's just temporarily. It's very easy to regain that pawn. Usually they play pawn to c3 here, but if pawn to c3 is played, the game will actually transpose into like a good French defense. Bishop to b5 will be a move that you see a lot when you play the CARO KANN, but bishop to g4 will also be a move that you play a lot in the CARO KANN. Because if the d4 pawn is the main target, playing a move like bishop to g4, trying to get rid of the opponent's knight on f3 is super thematic. So after a move like h3, we actually just need to take on f3. Now, I think the queen will take. If the queen takes, it's leaving the pawn on d4 unprotected though, so that's already bad. And in fact, my opponent, my fellow viewers, is already losing the game on move 8. Let's break it down. First of all, the king is exposed. Why is the king exposed? There's this diagonal pointing towards the king. This is an unprotected piece. We are going to be hitting the opponent with queen to a5. Check. Queen to a5, it checks the king and attack the bishop at the same time. The only way to get out of this is to play knight c3. We block the check, we guard the bishop. But because the queen is no longer on d1, we're going to be playing the move. Pawn takes d4, applying pressure to the opponent's pinned knight. Wait, wait. Check, knight block takes. My queen is no longer going to be on d8 guarding this pawn. So what if the queen guard takes this pawn? If the queen takes this pawn, then my knight is under attack and my d4 pawn is under attack. Okay, it's actually nice, and I don't think the opponent is going to find it, but you always want to assume that your opponent is going to find the best move. So let's just take on d4. Let's do it that way. It's a free pawn. We're going to be taking on d4. He has to just castle Nawar, do something that doesn't outright loses the bishop. But the thing about his position is there's nothing he could do that just doesn't, or there's nothing he could do that loses the bishop because he has to develop, and any development move will save the bishop. Except that move, bro. Except this move. Like, not bishop to f4. Because no once I check if the knight blocks, I just take the knight. That's kind of crazy. So so there's a correction. On move on move 9, we're already ahead by a piece. Knight block, we take the knight. Any other move that he plays, we take the bishop. This is crazy. This is GG's. He blocks with the knight. We take the bishop. We're already ahead by a piece. From here, it's all about trading. It's all about getting these minor pieces developed. He castles his king on the queen side. And even though the right thing to do is develop my minor pieces, I'm super tempted to play a move like rook to c8 because it puts my rook on the same line as the opponent's king. And you know what happens when you put your rook on the same line as the opponent's king. But let's just play e6 to start, just to stay solid here. One thing that I want you guys to keep in mind about the CARO KANN as well is it's actually very, very solid. A lot of times in the CARO KANN, if the opponent knows exactly what they're doing, it may look as if white is ahead in development. But there's actually no easy way for white to break through the CARO KANN defense because the pawns, just like the French defense, which I will be making a video soon on, are just too solid. So knight to b3 was played. I was expecting this move. My pawn on d4 is under attack twice. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to play the move queen to a4. Now I'm guarding the pawn twice, but I'm also applying some pressure to this unprotected pawn on a2. So best he should do is just play king b1 and guard the pawn. But at that point, I'm just going to finish my development. This knight needs development. This bishop needs development. So he did find the move. I'm thinking of knight e7, but then my bishop no longer covers c5. I have to ensure that knight to c5 is not dangerous, which it's not. If it hits the queen and this pawn, queen b5 hits the knight. So let's just finish our development. Knight f5, knight g6. That's the idea. But because the opponent's king is on the queen side, I'm actually thinking of playing knight to c8, so that way my knight could go around to the queen side. Because you guys know I like to maneuver my pieces anywhere the opponent's king is. So queen to d4 was played. This is, I was about to say this is GG's. It's not GG's. Like the move knight b4 looks very attractive. But after knight b4 and the opponent moves the queen and I take on e2, the king is just going to move to c1 and it's not obvious how I'm going to be winning the game. I mean, it's still a pawn. It's still the attack. I'm going to be able to play knight c6, bring this bishop in the game. So we're do we do it do? Knight b? Yeah, we're definitely going to be doing it. I was worried about losing this pawn, but once I take king over, knight c6 actually hits the opponent's queen with tempo. Okay, we were expecting queen takes d4. We could start with knight c6, by the way, but let's just start with queen takes a2 check. The king is forced to move, and our knight is unprotected, so we have to be careful. Okay, I was actually thinking of knight c6, but I really like the idea of knight f5 because I thought my knight had to guard the other knight. But if I play knight f5, my bishop guards the knight on b4, and my knight attacks the queen. And I'm trying to play rook to c8 followed by rook takes c2. This is going to be a checkmate. So we put the rook on the c file, and being a CARO KANN player, usually you use the c file a lot for one of your rooks. So once the queen move, I hit him with rook to c8, and I will be threatening a checkmate. Queen went back to d2. That's fair. I'm still going to play the move rook to c8 because not only am I threatening rook takes c2, which would win the opponent's queen, I'm also threatening queen takes b3 because the c2 pawn is pinned. And remember, pinned piece does not protect. So this pawn is actually not guarding the knight. We could say this is an unprotected knight. So the queen moved over to d2, trying to check on b5. I was thinking of just taking the knight, so that way rook takes e2 will be made, but checking on b5 could be annoying. I mean, king to d8 is something. King to d8 is definitely something. Queen check here, pawn b6, there's no more check. And if bishop check pawn f6, and I'm safe. By the way, rook takes e2 wins the queen outright. Takes, queen takes, knight takes, king takes, and we're just better. But I think if I play queen takes b3 in this position, it's easier to checkmate the opponent. Remember, always look for a better move when you see a good move. Queen b5, king d8, it looks risky, but we spoke about the CARO KANN. There's no way for the opponent to break through and attack our king. There's no additional checks with the queen apart from queen a5. And if queen a5, b6, now we're hitting the queen and we're threatening a checkmate on c2. And if queen b5, king d8, bishop to g5, now we play f6, threatening the bishop and threatening a checkmate on c2. Pawn c3 was played. How do we checkmate here? Pawn c, okay, I'm not in a rush to move the knight because he's not able to take. If I sack the rook, takes check, queen block is made, king to b1, however, I am not seeing anything. So let's not sack the rook. There's also a check on a2. Check on a2. If king b1, we win the queen. Check on a2. King is not able to go to c2. If king d2, we take on b2 with check. King has to go to e1. We take on c3. Okay, we win a couple pawn, but that's not mate, though. That's the thing. That's not mate. But we're still going to be going with this idea. Let's go with the knight a2 idea. It seems like the move that wins the most material and gain the most initiative. King d2 is what he needs to play. He could still play king to b1 because it looks like a regular natural move, but king to b2, or if king to b2, I'm not going to take. I was going to sack my rook, and if he takes, that's mate. He plays king to b1, though, which means the b pawn is pinned to the king. And we know pinned pieces does not protect. So knight takes c3 is just a beautiful royal fork. The king now has to go to c1. And then once the king goes to c1, we grab the queen. But then the king goes to a1 instead, which means that's a free queen, but we don't want the queen. We don't even want the rook because that's just a checkmate. More CARO KANN against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1200 region. He plays e4. Let's play CARO KANN. And then after d4, we hit him with d5. This is the CARO KANN defense. It doesn't really matter if they go knight d2 or knight c3. We're always going to be taking on e4. And then once the knight takes back, we play knight to f6. Now, what we want them to do is to take on f6. And then we take with the e pawn. Very important, the e pawn. c3 is actually main theoretical move. So let's see if this guy knows what he's doing at 1200. Let's go bishop to d6. Bishop d3 is the correct theoretical move here. Let's castle the king. And queen to c2 would be the correct theoretical move. But then he plays knight to f3. And it also allows us to check his king, forcing him to block. And then he blocks with this bishop, which means we successfully managed to have him moving the same piece more than once in the opening. So that's nice. Let's continue with our setup. This knight goes to f8, knight d7. He castles the king. Let's go knight to f8. This bishop goes to e6, f5, or g4. He puts the bishop back on d3. Let's go bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. And they usually play h3, bishop to h5. That has to be the correct move. But I like to pull the bishop back to e6 and just have a look on the pawn on h3, knowing that I'm going to play moves like queen d7. He moves the rook. Let's go queen d7. Now we're threatening some sacrificial ideas on h3. And again, bishop to f1 should be enough to prevent the sack. He did not play bishop f1. He plays bishop e3. If you're going to try these types of sacrifices out, I want you to sack the bishop and then think about it after. Because after takes, I don't think I'm completely winning. This cannot be completely winning. But you guys have to evaluate the position to know why I like this sacrifice so much. It's because I get 2 pawns for the piece. So it's like he only has 1 extra point. What do I get for losing 1 extra point? I get to attack his king. Who doesn't like to attack someone's king, especially when the king is exposed? And one more thing, whenever people sack on h3, you notice how he's thinking about it? He may not even accept the sacrifice, which would be crazy because the best way to refute a sacrifice in chess is to accept it. Okay, I think he's actually very, very safe here. Takes bishop to f1, and he's very safe. Will he find it though? That's the thing. Will he find it? Bishop f1 also attacks my queen, so my queen has to go to h5, and then he goes bishop to g2, and his king is going to be safe. But then I'm going to play knight g6, and then I'm going to try to get more pieces in the game, and then he's not going to be defending accurately, and then I'm going to win the game, and I'm going to checkmate him. Ooh, he accepts the sacrifice. Let's take on h3. Will he find bishop to f1? He found bishop f1. Backside, guy's playing some chess. So check, bishop block, knight g6. He moves the knight somewhere. Let's go with check. Bishop has to block, and then we play knight to g6. This is a good way to defend against the sacrifice, but let's see if he can survive the sack. We have one, two, three pieces in the attack. He pulls the knight back to h2. Okay. Knight h2 takes king takes check, king back. I don't want to be trading. We definitely don't want to trade. Let's just play queen to h4. Knight back to f1 is what he needs to play. He puts the knight back to f3 though, so let's play queen to h5 at this point. So that way, whenever he moves the knight, we're going to be checking him on h2, which is not winning, by the way, because his king should be able to get to f1. All I need is one pawn. If I'm able to get one more pawn out of this, then I'm happy. He's not running away with his king. He's scared. That's what I like to see. I want to bring more pieces in the attack. How do I bring more pieces in the attack? I'm thinking of rook e4, but then I put my rook on the same diagonal as his knight. I'm thinking of f5, f4, but then I'm blocking out my knight and my bishop. I'm thinking of checking here though, but then he just blocks the check. Okay, let's just play the game normal. Let's play a normal game. Let's get my rook in the game. We're going to act as if everything is normal. We just sacrificed a piece, yes. Not because you sacrifice a piece means you have to win the game right now. And if you don't win the game right now, you're losing. No, let's just keep playing. His king is still weak. Let's just keep playing. Let's see the move that he's going to play here. I did not play a forcing move. And this is how you outplay a weaker player. If you play a forcing move, then it's going to be a bit obvious that they have to do something. But if you just play a regular natural move and have them plan on their own, they're going to be coming up with the wrong plans. So let's see the plan that he's going to be coming up with now. I think the right plan is to try to trade the pieces off the board. He plays rook to e2. Can't kill him for playing a move like that. It's not a terrible move at all. It's not a terrible move. Okay, let's play c5 here. My rook is on the same line as the queen, so I need to open the position. I need the position to be as open as possible. If he takes the pawn, then still not winning, but I get a discovered attack on his queen. Queen to b3. Yo, this guy's playing well. This guy's playing a bit too well. Let's go bishop to f5. It's actually bad if he takes on f4 here. And if he takes on b2, I'm going to try rook to b8 and target b2. For example, takes, rook b8, try to target b2. But if he takes on f4, this is actually a trap that I'm trying to set up. Taking on f4 will give me back my knight. I think the correct move is, if he takes the pawn, I take and I'm taking back the pawn. So bishop f4 is a nice move. That's a decent move. How does he react to a move like this? So he pulls the queen back. He did not take. He pulls the queen back. The thing is, I don't want to be the one who is trading the pieces, but I think I need to take on e3. I want to take on e3 so that way once he takes with the pawn, it weakens his g3 square. The thing is, how do I get a knight on the g3 square? Let's take on d4. We have to open the position. We have to keep the position as open as possible. He took with the pawn. Did he just blunder? Am I able to play rook takes, queen takes, knight f4 check? Well, knight f4 is not even a check. Wait. Rook takes, knight f4, queen moves, queen b5. Or do I play knight f4 takes? Okay, we're going with this line. Let's go rook takes, queen takes is forced. My knight goes to f4, hits the queen, hits the bishop, queen to b5. check is also an idea. In case he wants to play moves like queen e7, I'm just going to play queen b5 check and rook to e8. So he has to move the queen. He has to keep the queen close to his king, by the way. If he moves his queen too far away from his king, then he's going to be getting checkmated. And I think he also needs to guard this pawn because queen to b5 check will also hit the pawn. So queen to f2 is the move that I'm expecting him to play. Queen to d2 also does the job. Queen to d2 attacks my knight. So he's trying to force me to do something. Check. Maybe he's just going to move the king. Okay, we definitely don't want to trade here. We don't want to trade here. So let's play the move queen to f5, putting the queen on the same line as the king, guarding the knight. I think I need to start playing moves like g5, g4, getting more pieces in the attack. Okay, rook to e1. Are we going to see rook to e1? Because if he plays rook to e1, we're doing the procedure. He's playing too well. Knight h4 is not bad because I'm not really able to do a discovered attack, but the knight is unprotected. I just need to move and attack the knight, and he's going to be forced to pull back the knight unless I check here and then he moves, not really seeing what the check gives me though. So let's play queen to g4, hit the knight. He just has to pull the knight back. I probably should have put the queen here so that way this check is still possible. I'm thinking of h5, h4. I need to get these pawns coming up in the attack. I think these pawns are going to be helping me a lot. I'm also thinking of rook to e8, putting my rook on the open e file, trying to get my rook to e2 in this position. So queen to f2 was played. He guards it. What if I play knight d3? I think that doesn't work. Okay, let's play g5. As I promised before, we need to start getting these pawns in the game. He pulls the knight back, and now I'm thinking of h5. Now I'm going to push the pawn all the way up to h3. I think this is a real attack that is coming. In order for him to win this game, he has to trade the queens off the board or try to queen this pawn before my pawns start rolling. Oh boy, he just played rook to e1. What is this? That's a fork, sir. He blundered a fork. The moment the rook came in the game, he allowed a fork. Now he has to move the queen somewhere, and then I'm going to take, and then it's going to be meaning that he has the two minor pieces. I have the rook. But in this case, because I have so many pass pawns, my rooks should be beating those minor pieces. Okay, he plays knight to h2. He's trying to be like offense is the best defense. But first of all, I could just take the queen. And then if he takes my queen, I take his knight. And then I'm going to be ahead by what? Two pawns? But I think I prefer to keep the queens on the board. Okay, so what's the best way to win this? Keep the queens on the board or going to the end game and allow his rook on my seventh rank. That's the only reason why I'm going to keep the queens on the board. I don't want to allow his rook on my seventh rank. So let's just pull the queen back to d7, guard this pawn. Okay, oh my God, I blundered. I shouldn't have allowed queen takes f6. Okay, queen takes f6 is going to be tricky because we still have to take the rook. And now he needs to play queen takes g5 check first. He found it. And if I move my king here, he takes this with check. So I have to go here. Oh boy. This guy is playing too well and I'm playing too badly. But he only has a minute on the clock. We're going to be, okay, he took with the king. Let's play rook to e8 check. We have to start using our major pieces now. Where will he put the king? Once my queen joins the attack, he should be getting checkmate. He puts his king here. Okay, we're going to play this move, queen to e6, to prevent his queen from checking on h6. He is able to check on c5 though, but then I'm going to play rook to e7, and then he's not going to have any more checks on my king. And if he does not have any checks on my king, okay, he plays bishop f3. I understand bishop f3. I understand bishop f3. It allows queen e1 check though. Okay, queen e1 check is very good. Queen e1, king c2, queen to f2, hit the unprotected knight. Let's go queen e1 check. The king has to move. Oh, I thought the king had to go there. It didn't had to go there. How do we finish this off? Okay, let's play queen to b1 check. Let's keep forcing his king in the center of the board. Let's go. King c4, come on. Nice. Now we take on a2 with check. King still has to move. It's very important that we keep the tempo here because otherwise he's going to be checking us. Let's play queen to a6 check. The knight is unprotected. I'm trying to find a way to check his king and hit the unprotected knight. King back to c2. Let's go queen to a4 check. King B1, and then I have no more checks. King here. Oh, okay, let's check here again. I just want to ensure that the queen is not able to check here. This pawn is going to die, so let's play queen to d6, hit the unprotected pawn. He has to move the queen. Maybe he takes this with the queen, but then it allows my rook to get access to e3. Okay, he pulls the knight back. Very nice. Now we're going to play rook to e1, hit the unprotected knight. He moves the knight. Oh, his time is running out. His time is actually running out. Poor guy. But how do we win this though? Let's say I had to win. Maybe queen to g6 check. Oh, that's a nice move because now I have connected pass pawns. And then all I need to do is push the pass pawns up the board. That's very nice. The bishop moves, really doesn't matter. I'm going to push. There's nothing he could do to prevent push. And then once my pawn goes here, the rook guards it, and that's winning. But I'm not going to be able to show you guys because he has a second on the clock. With that being said, we're going to be playing more CARO KANN against 1300 level players. So stick around. Opponent is now 1300. Let's hit him with the CARO KANN. Before we play d5, is it going to be an exchange CARO KANN? You have to be equipped with the exchange CARO KANN and e5. I'm sure we're going to be facing some alien gambits in this series, or maybe I already. Let's see. If knight c3, then we're going to be facing alien gambit. I really need to play against some alien gambits because I want you. I don't want you guys to be afraid of the alien gambit. He plays knight to c3. Let's take on e4. I think we're going to be getting an alien gambit. By the way, after knight takes e4, we want to play the move knight to f6, hitting the knight. And the top move is to take on f6. But I'm not going to lie. At the low level, you guys are going to be seeing a lot of alien gambit. So if he plays the alien gambit, I'm going to be able to show you guys how to beat this alien gambit. He took on he took on f6. Okay, he didn't play. Let's just take on. Let's just take here. Let's just take here. This is the more thematic way to do it. Knight to f3. We go bishop to d6. This is also one of those times where you guys need to know your setup as well. So he plays bishop to e3. Let's just castle the king. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. And once we do this, the plan is to play moves like rook e1, knight d7, knight f8. It's very important that you know the setup here. So he plays bishop to e2. Let's play rook to e8. The whole idea is to get our knight in the game. He castles the king. Let's go knight d7, knight f8, bishop f5. This is all knowing our setup, knowing the idea type of thing. I want you guys to also notice that what I do before I develop my light squared bishop, I get my knight to f8 first. Pawn c4 was played. Let's play knight back to f8. And what I want to do is play moves like bishop g4 or bishop f5, queen to d7 and sacrifice my bishop on h3, or bishop b8, queen d6, and checkmate on h2. That is rook in the game. Now it's time for us to develop our bishop. Let's go bishop to g4. The plan is to play queen to d7. I think he's able to play pawn to h3 here. Yeah, no, that's actually the perfect time for him to play pawn to h3. But let's just pull the bishop back to f5. So that way I'm still able to play queen to d7 and sacrifice the bishop on h3. Knight to h4 could be played as well. But then if he plays knight to h4 and I move away my bishop, I can always argue that his knight is on the edge of the board. Otherwise, I'm going to go queen d7. There's also rook to c8 or rook to d8 that you guys need to keep in mind as well. So he plays bishop to d3. He's trying to get rid of the bishop, which is fine. If they play something like bishop to d3, you can always take the bishop. You could also just play queen to d7 because remember, to take is a mistake and we don't want to take so that way his queen takes and it improves his queen. We want their bishop to take and then I take and it helps my queen. But then he didn't do that. He decided to apply more pressure to my bishop. But now I'm thinking of sacrificing on h3, and my knight on f8 is doing a very good role protecting the h7 pawn. So if I take stakes and then I go here, hit the knight, which is unprotected, he's not able to move the knight because my bishop takes. But then what if he just pulls the knight back to, let's say, d2? And then I check, king over, check, king over. Okay, this sacrifice is very thematic, and I want to do it. Okay, actually, There's only one time where this sacrifice doesn't work, and I don't think this is the time. But after takes, queen takes, it's very, very important that you calculate bishop to f5 because bishop to f5 attacks the queen, and there's not going to be a lot of attacking moves that you could do after that. However, if he decides to play bishop to f5, his knight on f3 is going to be left unprotected. Okay, he didn't accept the sacrifice, which is going to happen a lot. But if they don't accept the sacrifice, then it just means I'm ahead by a pawn. Now I'm thinking of sacrificing this bishop. Now I want to play queen to g4. Queen to g4 hits the knight. Oh, but then he has knight to h2. Knight h2, queen h5 is fine. Or do I just play queen to c7 with the threat? Queen c7, there's king h7. So it's weird. It's very weird. But we're ahead by a pawn, so I'm already happy. I'm not yet sure what exactly I'm trying to do with my queen. So I'm going to use the time to just get my rook in the game. It's very important that we play chess with all our pieces. All my rooks are now in the game. How do I sacrifice on g3? Queen c7 takes or queen g4 takes? Rook to d1 was played. He's trying to get his pieces in the game as well. I don't want to play c5, by the way, because my queen is now on the same line as his rook. I'm thinking of playing moves like knight to g6. There's always bishop takes g6, but this pawn cube is going to be good for us. Q g4, knight h2, queen h4. Let's go knight g6. Let's go knight g6. We want to bring all our pieces in the game. Me trying to make bishop takes g3 sacrifice work. This is just me trying to rush the position. Don't be trying to rush the position when you're playing, especially if you're a CARO KANN defense player. Usually CARO KANN players, they are more solid, but like I'm more aggressive. So even when the position is silent, I'm still gonna try to make noise, basically. So he took, I was expecting that. Let's just take, just keep in mind, whenever you have this little pawn cube happening, it's good for you. He now plays pawn to c4 to attack the bishop. The bishop has to move out the way, but let's just pull the bishop all the way to b8. This is also something that you guys need to keep in mind. One of the reasons why we want to move our rook to either d8 or c8 in this position is because we want to be able to pull our bishop back to b8, and in some lines, our queen could go to c7 or d6, assuming the pawn is not there, so that way we could continue the attack on his king. He does not have any light squared bishops in this position. I have the light squared bishop. I also have the bishop here. And what I've been telling you guys is whenever you have the bishop here, you want to attack on the color that the opponent is not present. That makes sense, right? So QD3, we hit him with QD5, hit the unprotected knight, hit the unprotected pawn. We have no intention of taking the pawn though. We're trying to win the knight. And if the knight moves, queen to G2 is a checkmate. So what is he going to do? I think he's going to move his bishop somewhere. Because once he moves the bishop, he's going to be guarding with the queen. But then, my fellow peeps, the knight and the rook is on a light square, and the guy does not have a light squared bishop. So even if he moves the bishop, bishop to g4, I was about to say bishop to g4 wins the knight, but then he has king to g7. So let's see. I know that it's winning, but how do we win? Where is he going to put the bishop? Let's say he plays bishop to d2. Bishop d2, bishop g4, king g2. And if queen h5 trying to play queen h3, he plays rook to h1. So he's surviving. He's surviving. Bishop d2 was played. So bishop g4, king g2. I don't want to be greedy and grab the pawn. How about bishop f5? How about g5 though? How about g5? Because if the knight is the piece that is in the way and we're trying to get rid of the knight, why not just play g5, g4? If knight to h4, we hit him with g5 again. Let's play g5. G5 seems to be the most threatening. And the good thing is, I could still decide to go bishop g3, even though, well, bishop g4, even though I don't think I'm going to go bishop g4. Queen takes a2 is still a free pawn. Let's not be too greedy. The goal is to continue with our attack. King to h2 was played, not a move I was expecting. So he plays king to h2. Oh, that loses. This is losing. This is losing because he's attacking my bishop. I thought I had to pull the bishop back and then he goes here. But then once I play pawn to g4, hit the knight, he's not able to move the knight. And if he puts the knight on h4, preventing the mate on g2, pawn to g5 hits the knight again. But if I play pawn to g4 and I take the knight, he takes my bishop, though. It's tricky. It's very tricky. But we're still going to be playing pawn to g4 because I could actually play pawn to, let's say, pawn to g5, king to g7, rook to h8, and then my rook starts the attack on the h file. Queen to b, oh, I was about to say queen to b3 could be an idea. So after takes, 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 he takes. But then if queen to b3, there's queen to h5. And my queen is on the same line as his king. So he could be in trouble there as well. Okay, he found queen to b3. We're not going to take the knight because then we're going to be losing our bishop in the process. What we're going to be doing is playing queen to h5, putting our queen on the same line as the king. So once he moves, well, if he moves the knight, we get some discovered attacking ideas. If he puts the knight on h4, there's g5. He decides to move the king, however. So that's just a free knight. And now I take the knight. He's going to be getting checkmated on the light squares. All I need to do is either play, well, bishop to g2 followed by queen to h1 is going to be a checkmate, which is why he resigns. More CARO KANN at the 1400 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400, e4, more CARO KANN. D4, we play D5. Knight C3, we take the pawn. We know what's happening here. He takes on E4, we play knight F6. We're not afraid of alien gambit. And if he takes on F6, we take with the E pawn. We know what's happening here. We're chill. So he took on F6. Remember, taking with the F pawn is what you guys need to play. And then after they develop, you actually don't really need to pay too much attention to their development, to be honest. You just need to remember to put your bishop on D6, point it towards H2. He develops his bishop to D3. We castle the king. He castles his king. Now we need to get these pieces in the game. So the sacrifice that I like to set up is when my bishop goes to G4, but I need to finish some development first. I have some stuff to do first. So let's go knight to d7. Pawn to c4, we go rook to e8. I want to ensure that I'm able to get my knight to f8. Pawn to c5 was played a bit too early. Let's just pull the bishop back to c7. I want you guys to notice how this is now a backward pawn, and this is also a square that I could easily get my pieces on. He's trying to play b5 though, which is not bad. So let's play a6, preventing b5. This is called prophylaxis. And then he plays bishop to b2. I'm not gonna lie though, he's completing his development very, very quickly. But I don't think he's putting his pieces on squares where they're actually doing stuff. I'm referring to this bishop though, like it's pointing towards its own pawn. But let's see, let's pull the knight back to f8. That's the plan. Bishop to g4 is coming next. He plays a3. I was actually expecting him to play a4. But let's go bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. He plays h3. And one thing I could do is play bishop e6, queen d7, and then try to sack. Let's try that. Usually bishop h5 is better, but let's try bishop back to e6. We already create the little weakness. So that's actually one way in which you guys could play. And then, okay, now we play queen to d7. We're trying to sack on h3. I think he needs to play bishop f1. There's no king to h2, so he has to be very, very careful about his position. And then once he defends against our sacrificial idea that we really like to play, we get our last piece in the game, and then the knight on f8 will be joining the game via g6. Like, I think you guys should get the gist of how this line works by now. The thing about the position is he knows that I'm trying to sacrifice on h3, but he's just not sure what to do against it. Like, especially if he's not seeing bishop f1. Bishop f1 is just a move that you have to see. Not seeing bishop f1 is it's just bad here. So he decides to play rook to e3. How accurate is that move? Let's say we sack and he takes. Our rook is attacking his rook, so we could even take his rook and then take. Oh, okay, our knight is not able to join. Let's say we sack, then we take. He goes knight e5. So takes, takes, grab the rook, takes, take on h3. We're going to have two pawns for a piece, so all we need is one more pawn and the position is equal. Queen to f1 is not a bad defensive move because it tries to trade the queens off the board. Yeah, queen to f1 could be a bit annoying. I'm not going to lie. Let's just get more pieces in the game. He has queen to f1, so I'm not going to sack. But now the queen is on e2. Now the queen is on e2. So let's think. Okay, oh, what do we do? He puts the queen on the same diagonal as the. I'm trying to be instructive, but he blundered. But give me a second. Let me calculate my sacrifice. Give me a second. If I take stakes, takes queen takes. Let's let's just go for the. This is called a pin, by the way, because the rook is on the same diagonal as the queen. He quickly brought over his next rook. We're not necessarily in a rush to take that rook because it's a dead rook anyway. So let's just use the time to bring our knight in the game. This is usually how we bring our knight from f8 in the game, by the way. Keep this in mind. He took with the bishop, we take with the h pawn. Very attractive pawn cube if you're into pawn cubes. And after queen d3, now that he's trying to escape the pin, now we take. He took the rook. Because we're winning, the goal is to start trading pieces off the board. Let's go bishop f5, hit the queen, allowing this trade off rooks. He has to move the queen. I'm going to trade the rooks, move my rook over. And please have a look on the guy's bishop on b2. You remember I told you guys that the bishop, it just doesn't do anything on b2. What is it doing? Let's just take the rook. He took with the queen. We go rook to e8, taking over the file. And then once he moves the queen, still thinking about sacrificing, but it actually doesn't work at this point. But let's play queen to d5. This is another way in which you could sacrifice. If you play queen to d5 and your queen attacks the knight, you could take on h3 because the g pawn is kind of overworked guarding both the knight and the pawn on h3. So he has to either move the knight or uses one of his pieces to guard the knight. Otherwise, my sacrifice will work. So he plays bishop to c3, has nothing to do with guarding the knight. So we grab the knight, we grab the pawn, my fellow viewers, because this pawn on g2 is overworked. He moves the queen. He moves the queen. Now I need to move my bishop because now he's threatening to take. So let's just pull the bishop back to f5. So we got another pawn from the position. His bishop is just unprotected and ugly. Okay, he plays knight to h4. I would love to play g5 and fork, but then he has queen takes. I, let's play bishop e4. Let's go bishop e4. The knight is never going back, especially since he plays f3. This knight will be trapped on the edge of the board for the rest of the game. Now let's play bishop d3. It's still unprotected, so I think he could still attack my bishop. But that's the only square where I could put the bishop. Or c2, he'll still attack it. But my whole point is, because he plays this f3 move, once I hit him with g3 or g5, his knight is going to be trapped. So he moves the queen to c7. He didn't attack my bishop. That's just a free knight. The knight has nowhere to go. I guess he's just trying to grab a free pawn on b7. I'm just going to take the knight, though. He took the free pawn. We take the free knight. h3 is now my threat. If I'm able to play h3, his king side is going to be messed up all the way up. So he moves the king. h3, king takes check. King has to go here. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing much. Let's go queen to g5. Queen to g5 threatens checkmate in a few moves. I was about to say mating too, but his bishop covers the e1 square. But queen to g5 followed by h3 should be at least a checkmate. So queen c7 guards it. And keep in mind, queen to g3 is still winning. It's called simplification. But because I have this massive attack on his king, we're not trying to trade queens. Let's play rook to e2, getting our rook on the second rank. There's no back rank issues, by the way. The best he could do is try to check on c8, move the king, then pull the queen back to h3. That would actually defend against the checkmate. But his position is just dead lost anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Okay, he took on c6, didn't try to prevent anything, which means that's just a checkmate. More CARO KANN at the 1500 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1500 level, but we're still going to be playing the CARO KANN defense. D4, here we simply need to play D5. Knight D2 is the same thing as knight C3, so we just need to take on D4, and then after the knight takes, we just play knight to F6. Okay, knight to G5. We're going to be facing an alien gambit. I thought we were not going to be facing an alien gambit. So persons who are afraid of the alien gambit could go bishop G4, but let's play H6. Let's allow the alien gambit, so that way I could show you guys how to beat the alien gambit. So after they sack the pawn, We take with the king. One thing that you guys need to keep in mind is in the alien gambit, we have crazy light square weaknesses, and there are a lot of ways in which we could lose. So you have to pay attention to what's happening now. For example, bishop to g4 is losing, knight to e5, white got back the piece, that's GG's. The winning move in the alien gambit is to play pawn to c5. You have to remember the c5 move. And then after they play c3, I think now we just need to continue with our development. Let's just take on d4 here. Let's open up the position a bit. Slightly risky, by the way, because our king is on f7. But he decided to just develop his bishop. So let's just develop our pieces as well. Maybe he castles the king, but we're just trying to complete our development as quickly as possible. But just always ensure that you're on the lookout. Any possible checks that could come to your king, you pay attention to those checks. Now, he took with the pawn. Please do not fall for the trick where you're like, I have two pieces on the pawn. He only has one piece on the pawn. Let's take the pawn because his queen is actually behind it. So if takes, knight takes, queen takes, bishop to g6, and I'm losing my queen. With that being said, we need to just continue with our development here. We need to trade some of the pieces off the board. So I'm thinking bishop to g4, seeing that my knight is now guarding the e5 square. So bishop to g4, knight e5, I takes, and I'm fine. Bishop to g4, if bishop c4 check, I have e6. So let's go bishop to g4. We are ahead by a piece. So the goal from here is to trade some pieces off the board to ensure that your king is safe. My next move is to play pawn to e6, develop my bishop, swing my rook in the game, artificially castle, and then I'm just chilling with the extra piece. So he got his king out the center of the board. I can and will take this knight. I'm just not going to do it as yet because he's pinned and I'm not in a rush to do it. So let's just play pawn to e6. Let's continue with our plan. Now he only has two possible checks on our king. Just ensure that you're aware of how can he check my king? How can he check my king? Always answering that question and he should be good. Now he plays rook to e1. I'm trying to develop my bishop and I'm trying to trade. My pawn is under attack. It's heavily guarded. So where are we going to develop our bishop? Somewhere where it gains a tempo, hits the rook. Will he trade more pieces off the game? Be my guest. We're going to be trading every single pieces off the game until the position is just died out like this. And then, oh, okay, which is why he plays rook to e3 makes more sense. Because again, being a CARO KANN player, playing the alien gambit, you try your best not to trade a lot of pieces off the board. And this bishop on c1 usually sacrifices on h6 a lot. So he plays rook to e3. I'm thinking of just playing knight to d5 here, though. That's just more tempo on his rook. And if he check, I still takes. If rook e4, I go bishop f5, and the rook has to move, and then I take here. I mean, that's still good for me. And at least I wasn't forced to give up my bishop for a knight, or I could take, queen takes, knight takes, hit the queen. There's just so many ways to play this position. Which one is the safest? All I'm trying to do is find the safest way because I have some respect for the alien gambit. So let's take the knight. Let's actually just get rid of the knight. Let's start trading. Once the queen takes, I'm going to take more material. But it's not because I'm greedy. It's because I'm trying to play moves like queen to g4 and just get the queens off the board. If you could trade the queens when someone play the alien gambit against you, then you've already won. Oh, but then he plays rook takes. Guy plays rook takes. Okay, rook takes, there's knight takes d4. Call me greedy all you want. That's a pawn. I'm attacking the rook. Not seeing any good checks that he has on my king. Call me greedy all you want. That's a free pawn. And the rook has to move. So now we're just ahead by 3 points. He puts the rook back on e3. Now we need to get the rest of our pieces in the game. I have an unprotected bishop, so I need to be careful about tactics. But I'm not seeing any checks on my king. My e6 pawn could be in danger, but that's me being a bit too passive. Why not rook c8? Let's go rook c8. Rooks needs open file. Probably should have put this rook somewhere so that way I can run with my king. But I've seen Witty Alien does that guy has done some weird stuff to the CARO KANN. So maybe I should have a match against him where I only play the CARO KANN, he only plays his lines, and then I try to beat it. That would be crazy. So queen to a5 was played. Unprotected pawn, unprotected bishop. But we're ahead by a piece and we need to trade pieces off the board. So queen to a5 is a no-brainer. Queen to a5 is actually an attacking move because he's actually not able to trade queens. He has to run away with the queen. With that being said, I gain a free tempo because obviously if he trades the queens off the board, then I'm just winning. So he traded the queens. This is just winning. Let's just take from here. It's just a matter of converting a winning endgame, especially since he plays pawn to a4. Now it's winning, winning because he did not ask his pawn. Okay, it's not completely losing, but I'm still gonna play knight b3, hit the rook, hit the bishop. Because the knight is unprotected, he will be able to play bishop to g6 check. And then when I takes, the rook takes. But at least I'm going to be trading more pieces off the board. So knight b3, the idea is to fork here, but he's just going to play bishop g6. Oh, he didn't find it. That's crazy. Guys, 1500. That's crazy, bro. Okay, let's just take the free bishop with check. Rook has to take. Let's take it the bishop. Now we're ahead by what? I'm not even sure. 6 points. And I'm hitting this bishop. He plays bishop to b5. Okay, let's just finally bring this rook in the game. The goal is to checkmate him on the back rank, which is why he plays g3. Now I'm going to put my rook on his second rank because I want to play moves like bishop to b6, hit the rook, target the f2 pawn. So b3 was played. Let's hit the rook. Let's target the f pawn. And even if he plays rook to f3 to guard the f pawn, I am able to take on f2. Not that, oh, that was bad. That was bad. That was bad. Luckily, I'm ahead by so much points. I thought I was able to play knight to e4 or knight to g4, but it's not possible. But he still resigns. We'll be playing CARO KANN against 1600 players, so stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. He plays e4. Let's go CARO KANN. D5 we play, well, D4 we play D5, knight C3, we take on E4, and then once the knight takes, we play the move knight to F6. Now, if you play bishop to F5, that's like one of the classical lines. Knight F6 is very, very easy to play because once they take on F6, first important thing that we want to do here is take with the E pawn so that way our bishop gets very easy development. Now, what I'm about to show you guys is also like a setup. Know the setup. The order in which you play the move isn't as important. We're going to play bishop e6, castle the king, move the rook to e8 so that way the knight is able to go to f8, and then we're going to be developing our bishop. So he plays c3. Let's first castle our king. We're going to move our rook, check the king, or just put the rook on the open file that the king is on. And then once he makes a move, we're going to be moving our b knight to f8 so that way we're protecting the h7 pawn. So let's go knight to d7. He makes his move. Now we play knight to f8. And what I'm doing now can be played against anything that white does. So unless he plays a move that is just immediately attacking something in your position, you could just continue with your plan. So he moves his rook to e8. From here, we usually play bishop to g4 or bishop to f5. I personally just like to put the bishop on g4 because I'm able to sacrifice on h3. But, a move like bishop to f5 is usually the more principled move, but both of them is good. So let's go bishop g4, he plays h3. We pull the bishop back to f5 so that way we're able to play queen d7 and sacrifice on h7. Bishop to d3. Now, whenever they play bishop to d3 here, they basically know what's coming. They know that you're going to sack the bishop, so they're getting rid of the bishop. If this happens, however, don't take the bishop. Just allow them to take your bishop. So we're going to play the move queen to d7. Remember that to take is a mistake, and you only trade when it improves your position. So queen to d7, let them take your bishop, then you take back, and then you just continue with some regular ideas. Play positional chess, put all your pieces on good squares. He plays queen to d2, and immediately I'm thinking of sacrificing my bishop. Especially, like, let me tell you guys something about the sacrifice. One, you sacrifice the bishop if once you take, the knight is under attack. You don't really want to sack the bishop if the opponent is able to play some bishop f5 move and the knight is under attack. With that being said, let's just sack the bishop. And I'm not necessarily trying to say, this is completely winning. There's nothing in which he could do. But it's going to be so hard for him to defend against a position like this. Worst case scenario, you play the game, go back to chess reps, see how you do the line, train the line some more, and then come back and play the game. That should be the strategy that you guys are using to win. So he took, let's take the queen, hit the knight, and then the attack begins. Now, to get more pieces in the attack, I like to play more. Okay. Oh, that's a nice move, actually. I was about to say, okay, that's just a terrible move. But bishop to f4 is actually a nice move. Because what I was, well, I thought he was blundering the knight. But if I take his knight, he takes my bishop. And I don't want to be doing too much trades. What if I check here first? If I check here, he has to block with the bishop. Then I take the bishop. And then if he takes back my bishop, then I take the knight. That's the move I had to find. I had to find that move. So we check here. If he moves the king, I take the bishop because putting the queen on g4, this is now two pieces attacking his bishop and the queen attacking his king. So I tell you guys, like, he has to find like some carjacking defense in order to defend against these bishop takes h3 sacrifices. It's going to work so much if you play this variation of the CARO KANN. The game is actually over now. Move the king, free bishop. Block with the bishop, take the bishop first, then take the knight. So he blocks with the bishop. First, we take the bishop, and then once he takes back, we don't take this pawn with check. Because if we take the pawn with check, the queen blocks the check guarding the knight. So now we take the actual knight. Now we got back our piece, and because we sacrificed a piece for two pawns, we're now just ahead by two pawns. With that being said, all trades are good. We're also attacking his g3 pawn, which it's kind of hard to tell how he's going to defend g3. Because if he moves his queen away, I take the bishop. He decides to defend with his king. Not bad, not bad. Now we need to get this knight in the game. How I like to get this knight in the game is just to play knight to g6. And if they ever take on g6, we take with the h pawn and we have a nice little pawn cube happening here, which means our king is going to be extremely safe. So he plays rook to f1, understandable. He does not want to trade. Oh, but I want to trade, no? Let's just play queen to e3. I'm ahead by two pawns. No, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to convert a winning position. Trade the pieces off the board. Get to the end game. Once you're in the end game, the focus is more on pawns. Let's take, hit the bishop. Now we're going to be thinking about attacking weak pawns, push past pawns, activate the king. He took on g6, which is even better for us. Okay, getting the pawn cube here is fine, but I'm going to take with the f pawn just because I want to immediately get my king in the game. And remember, when you're in the end game, it's very important that you get your king in the game. He plays rook to e1. I'm trying to trade anyways, but okay, I could play rook takes e1. Rook takes e1 is not a bad move if you're watching this because after king takes, I'm able to play king f7. His rook is not able to enter, and I'm going to be able to play rook to e8, and I'm fine. But usually, when they play moves like rook to e1, attack the rook, we just like to double up on the rook. So we immediately threaten to win their rook. And if they take our rook, we take back, we maintain the file, and then we continue by bringing our king in the game. So let's just take. Now, I'm assuming he's going to guard the second rank. Now we get our king in the game. Now, in order for us to win this end game, we have to ensure that we understand pawn majority. We have four pawns versus his one pawn. With that being said, we're going to be able to create our pass pawn on the king side. The reason why he just plays rook to d8, he wants to play pawn c4 followed by pawn d5 to create his pass pawn and on the D file. But let's just keep activating our king. King to e6 prevents this move. And if he plays here, then I'm just safe. Now he plays king to g2. I have to be careful not to get my king, my rook trapped. So let's play king to d6 so that way my rook could enjoy this file. King to f2. Let's just pull the rook back. He pulls the rook back to d1. Now let's start advancing our majority. Let's play h5. He moves his king, attacking our rook. Let's play f5. And the goal from here is just to advance these four pawns. Eventually, we're going to be able to trade one of these pawns for one of his pawns, and then we're going to be left with three pawns. So pawn to c4 doesn't do much. Let's play pawn to g5. The plan could be to play pawn to h4, and then we're going to be left with three pass pawns. And remember in the end game, pass pawns must be pushed. He's pushing up his pawns, but it's not a huge majority that he has. Let's play pawn to h4. He took, let's take back. Now we have three pass pawns to push up the board. Rook to g1 is attacking my pawn. I was expecting that move. Now I'm able to play rook to g4. And yes, I'm actually purposely sacrificing one of these pawns because, and this is another way how you convert a winning position. If he takes, king takes, I'm actually able to play pawn to g5. And if I'm able to play pawn to g5, his king will not be able to take my pawn because my pawn is going to be turning into a queen, which is why he did not accept the trade. He decided to protect his pawn. Let's continue pushing our past pawns. Remember, in the end game, past pawns must be pushed. So once you get those past pawns, start pushing your pawns up the board. Okay, he moves the pawn to a4. Pass pawns must be pushed. Let me push my pawn. He kept on rolling his pawn, but I'll continue to roll my pawns as well. Now he has to play rook to a1 in order to, just stop my pawn from moving. But then once he plays rook to a1, I could even take here and he's going to be losing two pawns and it's just GG's. Or I could play rook h4, just guarding my pawn on h2. So he did play rook h1. Let's just take this pawn. And then once the rook takes, we take one more pawn on c4. Okay, let's take the pawn. Now we're ahead by what? Three pawns? Okay, that was just a check. Let's just move the king. King activity is very important in the end game. He took, let's just take back. And even if he win one or two of these pawns, I'm going to be able to win with these pawns. So it's definitely over. Okay, he hits the pawn. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to move my king to g5 and attack this pawn. Because if he takes this pawn, I'm able to simplify the position, which he did. So now I'm able to check here, sacking another pawn. But once his rook takes and I takes, my king is going to take. And then this is now just completely winning. He moves his king. I just need to move my king. And my opponent resigns. More CARO KANN at the 1700 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. Let's hit him with the CARO KANN. Before we play d5, and then we're seeing an advanced CARO KANN. Now, bishop to f5 against the advanced CARO KANN is fine. Pawn to c5 against the advanced CARO KANN is also fine. I personally play both of them, so maybe I'm going to try to use both of them in the video. Let's see. So he plays pawn to c3, and now we're just going to be playing knight to c6. Now, one thing I want you guys to keep in mind when playing against the advanced CARO KANN is the d4 pawn becomes the main target. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to take on d4 first, so that way once he takes on d4, it just remains a backward pawn. But what are we going to be doing next? We're going to be developing our bishop to g4. Why g4? Because it attacks the knight, which is one of the main defenders of the d4 pawn. So everything that we do now is going to be based around the d4 pawn. You're about to see moves like knight e7 to f5 to attack the d4 pawn. There's also moves like queen to b6 to attack the d4 pawn. Bishop to b5 was played. I guess he's trying to eliminate some of my attacking pieces on his d4 pawn. So queen to a5 here does not win, by the way, because he's able to play knight c3, blocking the check. Let's just play pawn to e6. The plan from here is to get my next knight to f5. He took on c6, which is breaking principles. I mean, even if the goal was to give up his bishop for my knight, he could have at least wait until I attack the bishop. No, I'm just going to take, and then I'm going to be continuing with the same exact plan, which is to get my bishop, my knight to the f5 square and get my bishop to e7. Pawn a3 looks like he wants to play pawn b4 to prevent c5, I'm assuming, but that doesn't even seem accurate because I'm able to play moves like a5 and attack his pawn. And then if he takes, his position is all open. So let's just continue with our regular plan. Let's go knight e7. The plan is to play knight f5, bishop to e7, castle the king. This is how we want to be playing against the advanced CARO KANN. Then he plays queen to d3. Queen to d3, I'm thinking of just going knight to f5. But what could be annoying is if knight f5, he finds somewhere to put the knight. Actually, if he moves the knight, my bishop comes back. Queen to d3 was also, it doesn't seem to be accurate. Maybe he wants to play queen a6. But let's just continue with the plan. The knight goes to f5. The target is d4. In some cases, you could say I'm threatening to take the knight, then take on d4. But white is actually playing this kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, queen to a6 could also be met with queen to b6, keeping the spirit of the CARO KANN just being solid. But if he plays queen to a6, I may just play queen to d7 to guard it, so that way I keep the threat on his d4 pawn. He castles the king. Am I being greedy if I take the knight here? Because if I take the knight, queen takes, that's a pawn. And then he hits the knight. Knight move, he goes here. I'm ahead by a pawn. The position is solid. I don't want to be greedy. That's the thing. Let's just develop. I don't want to be greedy. It seems to work, but I'm not trying to be too greedy. I need to at least have the power to get my king castled first. The d4 pawn is the target. The d4 pawn will be the target, and it's not running away. So let's not rush to try to take it now. Queen back to c2. Yeah, he just doesn't care about his d4 pawn. He's attacking my pawn here. I'm thinking of just castling actually. Just let him have the pawn since he wants the pawn so much. Yeah, let's just castle. Here's my idea. If he takes the pawn on c6, which is bad, he's not going to do it. But if he do it, I take the knight, then I take on d4, hitting the queen and the pawn on f3. So I'm going to be basically winning back my pawn, which is why he plays bishop to e3 first. But now I'm able to take on f3, and his pawns is still doubled. Now he has the ugliest pawn structure. And now I'm able to play moves like queen to b6, which I already told you guys about, hitting the d4 pawn, protecting my c6 pawn, and applying pressure to his b2 pawn. A rook could go to b8, a rook could go to c8, pawn c5, pawn a5, pawn f6. These are all the ideas in the CARO KANN defense. Rook to d1 was played. He needs to guard his pawn. Now I'm thinking, let's play rook to c8. The whole idea is not just to protect the pawn, it is to play c5, which is why he played b4, but I was prepared for this move. I still want to play c5, but he has what we call the Maraxibine covering the square. And once he has two pawns covering the square like this, it's going to be harder for me to play c5. But that being said, I'm going to play a5, getting rid of this pawn first. Then I'm going to be playing c5. And again, if you're a CARO KANN player, your goal is to have a solid pawn structure. You don't want to have a lot of pawn islands like white. So for example, white already has one, two, three pawn islands. He took. Now I'm thinking, do I take with the queen or the rook? I prefer to take with the rook. Yeah, let's take with the rook. So that way, a3, I was applying some pressure to a3, but then he plays a4. a3 is still a weak pawn. So weak pawn, weak pawn, weak pawn, weak pawn. Now I play pawn to c5, getting rid of my weakest pawn. That was a backward pawn, by the way. Now if he takes, I'm able to take. But if he does take, I can also consider pushing the pawn. So he plays knight to d2. If I take, I'm going to be losing my rook. He plays knight to d2 with the intention of playing knight to b3. With that being said, I'm going to play pawn to c4. My weakest pawn becomes my strongest pawn because it's a pass pawn. He's attacking my queen. Okay, my queen has to move. I'm going to pull the queen back to a7. Now I have two pieces attacking this weak pawn. It's very easy to add another third piece. And I have two pieces attacking this pawn. He plays queen to c3 to guard this pawn, but then he left this pawn unprotected. So let's say takes. He's able to do something with the rook. Maybe rook to b7, but it really doesn't do anything because my piece coordination is like the best. So let's just take the free pawn on a4. Let's take on a4. And just like that, we won our first pawn. But we're still going to be grinding out the position. I'm thinking of playing check, but then he has king up. Check again, he has another king move, but then my queen swoops over though. Yeah, this is gonna be leading to mate, right? It's the most forcing move in the position anyway, so let's give a check. If he blocks with the knight, we could say he is leaving the pawn on f3 unprotected, and that's just a free pawn, which is why he moves the king. But now I'm able to check him here. Okay, if I check him here, what if he goes here? Because if he goes there, my bishop is under attack. If I play queen to g1, he takes my bishop. I'm not seeing a way to check his king. Okay, I'm not seeing any checkmates there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play h5. Why h5? No, I'm not worried. No, I'm not worried about any background weaknesses because my king could always run to h7. This is called creating loft. But h5 is also with the idea of bringing more pieces in the attack. Believe it or not, I could also play moves like g5 in this position. Okay, so knight back to f1 was played. Yeah, he definitely gone mad. That was a bad move. Now I'm able to play knight h4 for sure. Because if he plays king to h3, I take the knight with check. And if he plays king to g3, I do not take the knight because I have a checkmate on f3. Let's hit him with knight to h4 check. The king has to move. The bishop guards the knight. Remember, piece coordination is very important. He pulls the king back to g1. My fellow viewers, my bishop is hanging, but we don't care about the bishop because once we play the move queen takes f3, there is literally no way to prevent mate. More CARO KANN against 1800 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1800. Plays e4. Let's play pawn c6, some CARO KANN. d4, we play d5. And then after knight c3, we're always going to be taking on e4. So once he takes with the knight, we play knight f6. Will it be an alien gambit? Will he take on f6? He did take on f6. In this line, we take with the e pawn. We should know how this works now. Once we take with the e pawn, we develop our bishop, we castle the king. We get these pieces in the game. So from here, it's just a setup that we need to know. Knight f3, we go bishop to d6. The plan is to castle the king on the next move. Bishop d3, let's just castle, same idea. It's just like a setup. The rook goes to e8. Now that he castles though, I'm thinking of playing bishop to g4 instead of bishop e6, and bishop to e6 is usually where the bishop goes. And the idea is usually to go rook e8, knight d7, knight f8, then put the bishop out. But since he's allowing me to do this, after h3, I'm just going to maintain the pin, and this pin should be annoying enough for him. So let's go bishop to g4 here. So c3 was played. Let's finish our development. Let's go knight to d7 here, rook to e8, knight f8. That's the plan. H3, we spoke about this. Let's just pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin on the queen, and it should be an annoy. Well, there is queen to c2. If he plays queen c2 and I take, he takes with check. And then once I move, he takes back. Then I go g6. Rook to e1 was played. I want to play rook to e8, but then he just takes, and that's not where I want my queen. So let's just play queen to c7, and then I'm going to play rook to e8. So that way, if he decides to take, I'm able to take back with the other rook, and then I'm fine. And even in a position like this, moves that you could be thinking of are moves like pawn c5, taking here, trying to create some isolated pawn in white's position, so that way you could get a target to attack. So he pulls the bishop back. I'm assuming a queen is going to d3 soon. But if queen d3, I should be able to play bishop g6. So let's just play rook to e8. And if queen to d3, we could play knight to f8, because the whole idea of this knight is to join the game via g6 and protect the h7 pawn. So he develops the bishop to e3. Not bad. Everything seems to be normal here. I'm thinking of c5, but he's just not going to take. Thinking of, let's go knight b6. Let's go knight b6. If queen to d3, then we go bishop to g6. Otherwise, I want to play moves like knight c4 or knight d5. Queen to d3, I was expecting that move. If I take the knight, I will lose the game. So let's pull the bishop back, hit the queen, forcing the queen to move, and then my knight should get the c4 square. So he pulls the queen back. Let's just play knight c4. Yeah, let's go knight c4. We can always just eliminate his bishop, so that way we're left with the extra bishop. I am also attacking this unprotected pawn, but I'm expecting him to take the bishop, give me the pawn cube, and then play queen to b3, hit the knight, guard the pawn. That's what I'm expecting. So he took, let's take back. Now I got the pawn cube. Now I'm expecting queen to b3, hit the knight, guard the pawn. Oh, he plays b3 instead. Usually you don't want to be pushing the pawns unless you're forced, or you have to, or you gain something. Let's take on e3. And then after he plays pawn takes, at least I could say he's a bit weaker on the dark squares. I don't want him to be able to play e4 though. So I'm going to play f5 just to prevent e4. And then my plan from here could be to double up my rooks on the e file and target this weak e3 pawn. So c4 was played. I don't mind if he plays c5, because if c5, there's bishop to g3. So let's continue with the plan. Rook to e7. My bishop is not getting trapped, so that's very nice. Rook to e8 next. Again, plan is just to double up. Queen to d3. Let's double up the rooks. We don't want him to play e4. And I think he needs to go knight d2 and try to play e4. But even if he plays knight d2, I could even play bishop b4, get rid of the knight, and then e4 is going to be impossible to play. His e3 pawn is going to be weak the entire game, and I could actually win the game from that. Rook e4, knight d2, bishop b4, takes the rook, hit the queen. Queen move takes, I get nothing from that. Bishop here, rook here, I get nothing from that. Let's play queen to a5, attacking the unprotected pawn. He wants to play pawn to d5, by the way, and create a passed pawn. So he's also trying to create some threats of his own. He plays rook to e2. Rook to e2, his rook is a bit soft. Can I play bishop f5? It's not f5 because he's able to play e4. Bishop f5, he puts the rook here. Then I go here, maybe. Not 100% sure. Let's see. Okay, let's go bishop here, creating some threats. Let's just force him to play defensive moves. Let's force him to play defensive moves. Then I go here, hit the rook. I think what I need to do is to trade off my bishop for his knight. If I'm allowed to do that, then his e3 pawn is going to be appearing even weaker. He has to find rook e1 now, though, and then I'm just going to go bishop g3. But he's taking a while to think. So maybe the time in which he's taking to think is going to haunt him in the end, because then maybe he's going to be in some time pressure, and that could cost him the game. So he did play rook e1. Let's go bishop g3, hit the rook, forcing the rook to move. Okay, now he puts the rook on f1. Knight to g5 could be something. It's not a huge threat, but we're still going to play f6 because I'm not seeing any immediate way how I could just do something and win. So I'm going to be playing some subtle moves like preventing his plan. And one thing I learned about is if you do not know what your plan is or you're not seeing the right way how to realize your plan, then your plan should be to prevent the opponent's plan. So knight went back to d2. Pawn to e4, I takes. Looks like he wants to play pawn to e4. I don't necessarily want to allow pawn to e4, but I'm not really seeing what I have to prevent e4. And if I try to play f5, I may lose this pawn. And if I play f4, he plays e4. And then if I play f5 again, he plays e5 again. I think I have a little idea. Let's go bishop to b8. You guys should see what my idea is, but I'm trying to play queen to c7 with the threat of queen to h2. And once his knight goes back to f3, I try to play moves like g5, g4, and chase away his knight. I just don't want him to play e4, to be honest. Now, if he plays e4 here, I may just pull my queen back anyways. And then if e5, I should be able to win a pawn. So it's very, very tricky, but this guy's playing some chess. So he plays pawn to c5. Maybe he wants to play knight here, knight here. But let's go queen c7. Let's threaten h2 first. We're not afraid of any check. We're just going to move the king. If he moves the knight, we check here. This is not going to be leading to any checkmate, by the way, but I don't want to give him the idea of playing e4. And now if he plays knight to f3, I could try rook to e4, because then it's going to be bad for him to move the knight. So I think this is actually a deadly battery, which is actually going to keep his knight on f3 for a while. But he's just taking a while to find the moves. It's taking him too long to find the moves. So now that he plays knight to f3, okay, wait. I'm thinking about rook e4, pawn e5 takes check. Yeah, that should be fine for me. Let's go rook e4. If he plays pawn to d5, it looks dangerous, but after takes and I move the king, his e pawn is actually weak, his c pawn is actually weak, so I should be fine. And pawn to f4 with the threat of hitting this pawn, and if he takes, I take the rook. That's also another idea. So he checks. Let's go king h8. Actually, I don't want any possible knight g5 to be threat. So now I'm attacking this twice. He moves the rook to guard it. If f5, he should still be able to take. But if g5, he's going to think for a while on this move, g5, because I'm threatening to play g4, and he's not able to move his knight. If he moves the knight, my queen gets entered into his position. So this g5 move, he's going to take a while on this g5 move now. And he only has a minute and a half on his clock. He plays g4, which loses the game. I mean, his time was also running out. You don't want to be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. The king is exposed. The knight is unprotected. Queen to g3 checks the king. Rook has to block. We take the knight. We win the game. So let's give a check here. If he moves the king, I'm also going to be taking the knight. But this is usually how stronger players beat strong players. Like, it's not a case where you're like, I'm stronger than you. I'm just going to crush you. No, it's like, the player is actually playing good chess, playing good chess, playing good chess. Then he makes one mistake. Or maybe he's playing good chess, but he's taking more time to play good chess. So let's now just take the knight. We're ahead on the time and we're ahead in material. Taking on e3 next is also winning. Taking on h2 is also winning. There's no rook here because my bishop covers the square. And he has 30 seconds on the clock. Queen to f7 was played. I don't think there's any perpetual checks that I should be worried about. If he checks here, I'm just going to move. So let's just take on g4. Yeah, we're just finishing him off. Maybe I shouldn't have opened this h file towards my king. Luckily, I have this bishop. He checks. Let's just move. There's no more checks on my king. Taking with the pawn, I'm just going to grab this. Okay, so let's grab this. Wait, if I grab this, he grabs this. And then after takes, rook takes, king up, he takes. Whoa. So let's go bishop g3, hit the rook first. And then once he puts the rook somewhere, I take on e3, which could lead to a mate. So he puts the rook there, hitting my queen. What if I sack the queen? Like take the pawn here, he takes my queen, I check, he has to block with the rook, I take the rook, king takes, and that's mate. I'm definitely sacking the queen. I can't sack the queen because if takes, queen takes here first. And then when I takes, he takes, and then when I check, he blocks. So let's just take on e3. Let's not try to be too fancy. So he moves the king. This bishop is still saving the entire position. Let's go rook to f4 here, hit the rook. My queen guards the rook, so I'm fine. He only has 5 seconds on the clock. He pulls the rook back to f1. Okay, I'm not seeing the immediate mate, but this check should lead to something because he has to block with the rook. Then I take, and that's a checkmate. More CARO KANN against 1900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Still going to be playing the CARO KANN defense. D4, we play D5. And then again, knight d2, knight c3, it's the same thing. Just take the pawn when they move the knight, develop your knight to f6, and if they do the alien gambit, allow them, because the alien gambit is refutable. Now, once they take on f6, we take with the pawn, and then what white is about to do is going to be extremely theoretical. And what I'm about to do is also going to be theoretical because I learned it on chess reps. So it's bishop to d6. After bishop to d6, you're going to see bishop to d3. So white is going to be targeting my h pawn. Let's castle the king first. The move here is either queen c2 or knight e2. They're both the same thing. They're both correct. So he plays knight to e2. Now we're going to be playing the move rook to e8, applying some pressure to his knight. And then after queen c2, he's applying pressure to my h7 pawn. Then I play pawn to h5. Now, my whole idea with pawn to h5 is to play moves like h4 and then h3 to start some attack on his king. But then he plays bishop to d2. That looks like a sign that he's going to be castling on the queen side, which I have no issues with. So let's just continue with our development. Let's go knight d7. If he castles, then I go h3 with the idea of h4. If he castles on the queen side, then I just pull my knight back and then try to start some attack on his queen side. So he plays h3. Let's go knight back to f8. Eventually, this knight could join the game via g6 or e6, but then he decides to castle on the queen side. Okay, castling on the queen side is definitely a first. Let's continue with our development. Let's go bishop to e6. Now it's not no queen d7, bishop takes h3 sacrifices anymore. So king to b1 was played. Looks like a pretty safe king to me. How do we attack my opponent? I'm going to start by playing pawn to b5 because I think he wants to play moves like c4. And now that I play b5, if he plays c4 and I take, I get this open file pointing towards his king. After this, I'm going to play moves like a5, a4, a3, or a5, b4. Let's see. So he plays g3. Okay, I don't know why he plays g3, to be honest. Not sure why he plays g3. Maybe he's trying to guard f4. Maybe he wants to play g4, and it was a, I don't know. That was a weird move. Now I'm thinking of bishop d5 hitting the rook. Hopefully my bishop is not compromised on d5, but let's go bishop to d5. That's a nice square for a bishop. His rook now has to move somewhere. If he goes rook h2, I can also play h4, seeing that his pawn is going to be pinned. And if he moves the rook over, it's going to take him just a bit longer to start an attack on my king. So rook to g1 was played. Now he wants to play g4. But if g4, I should be able to play bishop h2, and that should slow down his attack. I'm thinking of a5 to start my own attack. Not sure how fast it is though, because a3, he's going to play this. Bishop to f3 is nice. Let's go bishop to f3 actually. Let's pin the knight to the rook. I'm threatening to win a knight. So the best he could do is guard his knight with maybe rook e1, just one of the rooks on e1. And then after that, I'm thinking queen d7 to attack this pawn or a5. I just think this a5 idea is too slow. But let's see how he reacts to this. So he uses the rook to defend. With that being said, his knight could move on the next move, something that we're not afraid of. So let's play a5 here. It's like we have to advance the pawns on the side that his king is on, because I'm sure that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to advance these pawns, but I think pawn to g4 is a mistake because I'm trapping his rook. So he's able to open lines on my king, but my bishop covers the light squares. And my dark squared bishop is heading to h2. So his rook is now trapped. So if he goes here, I take. If he goes rook f1, I have this. So his rook is trapped and we're about to be ahead by an exchange. It's by no means that we're at the end of the game. He took the pawn. Let's take his rook. Oh, but then he took with the rook. Taking with the rook leaves your knight unprotected, bro. What are you doing? Take the knight. Bishop h6. It's actually a bit tricky. I'm gonna take the knight. I'm just saying it's tricky. Take the knight. Bishop h6. Pawn g6. Pawn takes. Take the bishop first. If takes, I takes. Queen takes, and then the attack is mad. Free knight is a free knight at the end of the day. I am going to be defending. But once we're ahead in material, we just need to defend. And once the defense is successful, then we're going to be winning with the material advantage. So let's expect. Oh, but bishop h6, if g6, he takes back the bishop. So bishop h6, I have to take here. And then after rook takes, I go king over. Then he has queen takes. Luckily, my knight on f8 guards my h7 square. So it gives me a chance to play one more defensive move, maybe queen e7, with the idea of playing queen e4 and trading the queens off the board. Okay, this is weird. So he did play bishop to h6. This is going to be very, very concrete. I'm going to take on e4 first. I'm expecting rook takes g7. Then my king is going to move to h8. My knight prevents any queen from coming in. So once he plays queen takes, I'm going to play the move queen to e7 with the whole idea of playing queen to e4. If I'm able to survive this attack, I'm going to be ahead by an entire rook. So he took with the queen. I thought he would have took on g7 first. That's interesting. Okay, if I play g6, maybe he's gonna take. So I may still have to try queen e7 or queen d5. I think queen e7, both queen e7 and queen d5 does the same thing. Q d5, rook takes king over. W- This is guarded. There's no checks. Maybe rook back to g4 is what he's gonna play. Okay, maybe I need my queen on e7 then. Let's go queen e7. Because if rook back to g4, I want to be able to check on the back rank with my queen at least. You're just using too much time to calculate though. That's the thing. Because after rook takes king over, there's just nothing in the position. And then I'm just going to trade the queens on the next move. And he only has 15 seconds on the clock. Poor guy. He took on g7. Let's go king to h8. There's nothing here. There's no good rook checks. He moves with the queen. No, I have to be careful. This is where I have to be careful. Yeah, 7 seconds on the clock. So worst case scenario, we give a few checks to win the game. But let's try to be precise. Check on the back rank, or check here first, forcing the king to move, then check here. The rook comes in with check, the queen comes in with check, and that's gonna be mate. Okay, so let's check on e4. He moves the king. Now we check on e1, so there's no more bishop block. He moves the king. If I check here, if he blocks with the bishop, that's mate. If I check, he puts the king here, that's mate. If I check, the king goes here. I check here. Bishop has to block, and that's mate. So rook to e2 check will lead to a checkmate. King b3 doesn't change anything because once I check here, the king has to go here, and that's a checkmate. More CARO KANN at the 2000 level. Stick around. Opponent is now 2000. We're still going to be showing you guys the CARO KANN defense. Before we play d5, exchange CARO KANN at the 2000 level. Okay, knight f3. Let's just develop our knights. We know what's happening here. He developed his bishop. Let's keep developing. That's the whole point of everything. Now we're going to be finding somewhere for our light squared bishop. Then we're going to be taking care of the dark squared bishop. What we're not going to do is play e6 and block in our light squared bishop. So let's go bishop to g4 here. Bishop to b5, let's go e6. Bishop to d6 is coming because the bishop is on f4. If the bishop is on f4, we could go bishop to d6. That's what you can learn from chess reps. And if the bishop is on g7, we can always go to e7. So knight d2, let's go bishop to d6. If he takes, we just takes back and we're chilling. We're just going to be castling our king on the next move and we're fine. So let's just take back here. And then once he castles his king, we're going to be castling our king on the same side that he castled his king on, knowing that our plan is to do a minority attack. h3 was played. Let's just pull the bishop back. Let's maintain the annoying pin. If g4, we go back and ask him, where is he going to get his king castled? Otherwise, well, he castled his king, we castle our king. Rook to e1, queen c2, knight e5, those are the little ideas for white. Black's ideas, on the other hand, we're now in the middle game, by the way. A lot of person knows how to get to this position, but don't know what to do from this position. Just know that we're going to be doing some minority attack. If he takes, I think he wants to take and then swing this in with tempo. So let's play rook to c8 here, putting the rook on the open file. Eventually, we're going to be playing moves like a6, or we could play knight a5, then a6, b5, and put our knight on c4. These are the two ideas that we've been talking about a lot. So if you can't, by some way, get your b pawn to b4, try to just play a6, b5, knight a5, knight c4, and it will be attacking the b2 pawn. And then the moment he moves the b2 pawn, it weakens the c3 pawn, and then you get a target to attack. So what we're basically trying to do in the middle game of the exchange French defense is to use the minority attack to create some targets to attack. Okay, he pulls the bishop back. I wasn't really expecting him to pull the bishop back, to be honest. I think he wants to play knight to e5, but we're going to be continuing with our idea. Let's play, do we play a6 or do we play knight a5? Let's play a6. Because even if my pawn was on b5, I'm probably going to take with the b pawn anyways. So let's just play a6 with the idea of b5, maybe b4 in the future. Okay, he played a4. Usually when we go for a6, a4 is not a bad prophylactic move because he's basically saying the moment I manage to play b5, he's going to take takes and his rook is going to be getting the file. That being said, let's go knight to a5. We're going to be resorting to this idea. We have to ensure that we try to create some weaknesses in this pawn chain. Otherwise, our rook is not going to be active on the c file. It's the same way how his rook is actually not active on the e file because of this. So he also has this. So usually he tries to get a break on f5 and then I try to get a break on b4, or someone just does a mistake that doesn't work. So knight e5, that's a very nice move because my knight no longer covers the e5 square. He's trying to trade the bishops off the board, which is fine. Let's just get the bishops off the board. And then after he plays queen takes, the question is, do I go knight d7? I need to neutralize this knight. Knight c4 is not yet possible. b5 is not yet possible. Let's go knight to d7, trying to neutralize this knight. There's also ideas of knight b6 to c4 as well, because I am expecting some knight f3 in this position. So he did play this knight to f3 move that I was expecting. Now I'm thinking just knight c4. And then this is just not a bad square for my knight. I can also take knight takes, then knight c4. And then we're playing a major piece endgame, which could be very, very fun. I'm actually thinking of that. Let's just play knight to c4 here. Let's just play knight c4, applying some pressure to b2. This guy's playing really well, by the way. But I'm trying to take on e5, and after knight takes, queen takes, maybe I just go into the endgame and see if his endgame skills are as good as his middle game skills. He took taking with the pawn, I don't think makes sense. So let's take with the rook. Apply some pressure here. If the knight goes to e5, we takes, queen takes, we takes, rook takes, and then it's gonna be an endgame. So it's gonna be the person who has better endgame technique who's gonna win. Okay, queen to d3 was played. He's not fancying the endgame, but b5 is now finally possible. No, b5, there's b3. And then once I move the rook, I'm going to lose my b pawn. And then he may want to play a move like a5. It's very tricky here. It's very, very tricky. This is not possible. So let's double up the rooks on the c file first. So that way, if I play b5, he's not able to play b3, seeing that I'm going to win the c3 pawn. That's my idea. There's no knight g5 threats because knight to f6 just prevents the mate. And then I'm going to be able to play h6 and then chase away his knight. So what is he going to play here? This is actually a very solid, equal game. This is one of those games where Magnus is gonna have to win. I have to gonna use a Magnus technique. Knight back to d2 hits the rook. Makes sense. He's trying to neutralize my rook. Let's just pull the rook back to c7 here. Oh, rook to e3. He's trying to start some attack on my king. Okay, now we're about to have some fun. Okay, I'm thinking of actually playing b5 here. Like if I play b5, yes, the count in his favor. But after b5 takes, if he plays queen takes, I'm able to play rook to b8 and attack his queen. And if he moves the queen, I take on b7. But then he has check, which could be annoying. Okay, let's play rook to b8. Let's prepare it with rook to b8. I need to play b5, b4. So this is usually what it's like at the higher level. So maybe coming up in this series, it's very easy for me to play this b5, b4 idea. But I want you guys to notice how white is trying to really prevent my b5 idea while trying to ensure that he's attacking on the king side. Knight to f3. He puts the knight back on f3. Now I just think he doesn't know what he's doing, to be honest. Because what did that do? If this move I go here, now I'm able to play pawn to b5. I get my break in without any issue. And one more thing that you guys need to watch out for is some b4 move. So for example, if b4, it weakens c3, but if the knight is on d2 and can easily get to the c5 square, then that's good. So he took, I could take with the rook, I could take with the pawn and play b4. If I take with the pawn, b4, let's take with the rook, actually. It's best to take with the rook. He's still able to play b4, but at least sometime in the future, I'll be able to play a5. Now my plan is just to apply as much pressure to b2, and as soon as he moves the b2 pawn, I start applying pressure to c3. I wanted to play a5 here, so that way he's not able to play b4, but then I'm just gonna lose my rook. So do I go rook here or do I go queen here? They both apply pressure to his b2 pawn. Yeah, let's go queen here. It has to be queen here. So that way, if he plays b4, which is what I'm expecting, I'm able to play a5, getting rid of his b pawn, and then his c3 pawn is finally going to be the underweak backward pawn. So I want you guys to notice how I still managed to get the position that I wanted, but it takes some level of fighting. Okay, now he plays rook to b1. He's really not trying to create any weakness in this position. Now that he plays rook to b1, I'm thinking of rook to b3, because rook to b3 threatens rook takes c3 because his rook is unprotected. And if rook to b3, knight to d2, I'm able to take. No, I'm not able to take because the knight guards the rook. But if rook to b2, knight to d2, the queen no longer guards the b2 pawn. So we are still going to be playing rook to b3. So now we're threatening to just take on c3 because, our pieces are on the same line as his rook. So this is a pin, which means the b pawn is pinned. And if the b pawn moves out the way, we're going to simply take the rook. So he plays queen to c2, which means if rook takes c3, rook takes c3, rook takes c3, queen takes c3. Okay, he's really defending. But now I have another plan, which is just to get the a pawn all the way up to a3 and apply more pressure to this pin pawn, or just play rook to b7. That's more pressure on the pawn, but then he has rook to d2. Knight to d2. Oh, knight to d2 is coming next as well. So we have to start with rook to b7. Now we're tripling up on this backward pawn. Like, I think this game here will really highlight the plan on how you want to be playing with these types of structures. Now that he pulls the rook back, now my plan is to get this pawn all the way up to a3, and then I'm going to simply win the pawn. All his pieces are also in zugzwang, and he's not able to pull the knight back to d2 to attack my rook, because if he pulls the knight back to d2 to attack my rook, this rook is no longer in the defense. He moves his king. I guess he's trying to run over there with his king, but he's not going to be in time. Pawn to a3, pawn a3 is coming next. So he decided to just play c4. Okay, we should be able to take on c4. Yeah, let's take on c4. Let's not ignore that. Let's take on c4. Queen takes on c4. My back rank is currently fine, because after any checks, I could simply block with the knight. I don't want to risk anything, though. That's the thing. I just don't want to risk anything, because I just know that this pawn is dead. But let's do it. Let's just play a3. He has like 30 seconds on the clock. If he checks, I block with the knight, and I'm not seeing what he has. So he checks. Let's block with the knight. This is his chance to prove that there's an attack in the position. I'm not seeing any, though. If the knight goes here or here, I'm just not seeing what he has. He plays d5. Makes a lot of sense, because once I take this rook, apply some pressure to my knight. Are we gonna take though? That's the question. Or are we just gonna play this move and attack the rook? And then if the rook takes, we take here. And then after takes, queen takes, hit the rook, and it's just winning. Let's play pawn to a2. Remember, guys, offense is the best defense. Not because you see the opponent starts an attack on you, mean you should just sit and just get attacked. You have to attack back. Now he moves the rook. We take on b2, threatening his rook, threatening b1. And he decides to take on e6, which is fine. I'm already thinking to, yeah, just check on b1 is winning. If he takes with the rook, I'm just going to take with the pawn, and I have two queens on the board. He resigns.